Welcome to Zen Mind Temple tonight. You will discover a powerful secret, the path to inner peace, known to Zen wise men for millennia. Amidst the noisy world, they found a mind as clear as a lake's surface. Over the next 3 hours, we'll wander through 10 wisdom-filled stories, letting each word become a gentle breeze that calms your thoughts. Adjust your pillow. Let your body settle into the most comfortable position and feel the mattress supporting you. Now breathe deeply with me. Inhale, imagining fresh energy flowing into your body. Exhale, letting all tension dissolve with the breath. Close your eyes for a moment and let your imagination carry you to a small wooden temple nestled between mist-covered mountains. It is early morning, and the air smells of damp earth and burning sandor wood. A gentle breeze stirs the leaves of the ancient maple tree outside, its sound like a soft whisper. Somewhere in the distance, a stream chuckles over smooth stones. This is the temple of Zen Master Nonin, a place where time moves as slowly as the smoke curling from the incense burners. You are seated on a tatami mat in a simple room, your back supported by a cushion filled with buckwheat hulls. The light, filtering through the paper screens, is soft, casting diffused patterns on the wooden floor. There is a low table before you, upon which rests a single clay teapot and 2 cups, their surfaces slightly uneven, bearing the marks of the potter's fingers. You can feel the warmth of the room wrapping round you like a well-worn blanket, and for a moment, all thoughts of the outside world fade into the background. In this peaceful setting, we begin with a story that has been passed down through generations of Zen practitioners, a story about the nature of learning, of letting go, and of finding peace in emptiness. It is a story that speaks directly to the anxiety we often feel when our minds are cluttered with opinions, judgments, and the weight of what we think we know. Long ago, in a province not far from here, there lived a scholar who had devoted his life to the study of philosophy and religion. He had read countless books, memorized ancient texts, and engaged in debates with the most learned men of his time. Yet, despite his vast knowledge, the scholar found himself troubled by a persistent restlessness. His mind was always racing, jumping from one idea to the next, never settling into true stillness. He heard of Zen Master Nonin, whose wisdom was said to bring peace to even the most troubled souls, and so he traveled for many days to seek the master's guidance. When the scholar arrived at Nonin's temple, he was shown into the same simple room where you now imagine yourself. The master greeted him with a bow and, without wasting words, began preparing tea. As Nanin poured the hot water into the teapot, the scholar began to speak. "I have studied all the major philosophies, Master," he said, his voice carrying the faint edge of someone accustomed to being listened to. "I have delved into the teachings of Confucius and Laozi, and now I wish to understand Zen. Please instruct me in its principles." Nanin nodded silently as he placed a cup before the scholar. He lifted the teapot and began pouring, the hot water filling the cup, rising to the brim, and then spilling over onto the table, onto the scholar's robes, and onto the floor. "Stop," the scholar exclaimed, startled. "The cup is full. No more will go in." At this, Nanin set down the teapot and looked directly at the scholar. "You are like this cup," he said gently. "You are filled with your own opinions and ideas. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" In that moment, the room falls silent. You can almost hear the scholar's breath catching as the meaning of Nonin's words sinks in. The steam from the teapot curls upward, dissipating into the air, and for a while, no one speaks. This simple story, known as the empty cup, is one of the most beloved in Zen literature. It carries a profound truth that echoes through the teachings of the Buddha himself. In the Pali Canon, the Buddha is recorded as saying, "Just as a bowl, when emptied, is ready to be filled, so too is the mind that lets go of its attachments." This idea of emptying ourselves to receive new wisdom lies at the heart of many spiritual traditions, but it is particularly central to Zen, where the practice of letting go is seen as the direct path to enlightenment. But what does this have to do with our modern lives, with the anxiety that keeps us up at night, with the endless loop of thoughts that seem to play in our minds without pause? Let us explore this together. Anxiety, from a psychological perspective, often arises when our minds are full of worries about the future, regrets about the past, judgments about ourselves and others. These thoughts form a kind of mental clutter that leaves no space for peace. We might think of it as a room filled with so much furniture that there's no space to move, no place to sit, no way to breathe freely. The more we try to push these thoughts away, the more they seem to multiply, like trying to stuff more items into an already overflowing closet. Neuroscientists have discovered that this constant mental chatter is associated with what's known as the brain's default mode network, a set of interconnected brain regions that become active when we're not focused on the external world. This network is involved in self-referential thinking, planning for the future, and ruminating about the past. While it serves important functions, an overactive default mode network is linked to anxiety, depression, and a general sense of discontent. In Zen terms, we might say that this default mode network is our full cup, the endless stream of thoughts and opinions that prevent us from experiencing the present moment as it is. The practice of emptying the cup is essentially a way of quieting this network, creating space in our minds for clarity and peace. The Buddha taught that suffering, including the suffering of anxiety, arises from craving and attachment. He called this dukkha, a Pali term that refers to the dissatisfaction, stress, and unease that permeate much of human existence. The third of his Four Noble Truths states that this suffering can be ended by letting go of these attachments. This is not a denial of reality, but rather a recognition that our mental constructs, our opinions, judgments, and fixed ideas often cause more suffering than the situations themselves. Think about a recent moment when you felt anxious. Perhaps it was before an important meeting, or when waiting for news, or when reflecting on a conversation that didn't go as you'd hoped. What thoughts were filling your mind? Chances are they were either thoughts about the future, what if things go wrong, or judgments about the past, I should have said something different. These thoughts are the contents of your cup, the ideas and opinions that prevent you from experiencing peace in the present moment. The scholar in our story was attached to his knowledge, to his way of understanding the world. This attachment created a barrier between him and the wisdom he sought. Similarly, our attachment to our thoughts and opinions creates a barrier between us and the peace that is always available in the present moment. But how do we empty the cup? How do we let go of these attachments, especially when they seem so much a part of who we are? The Zen tradition offers many practices for this, but perhaps the simplest is the practice of mindfulness, paying attention to the present moment without judgment. Mindfulness in this context means noticing when our minds are filled with thoughts, but not getting caught up in them. It's like watching clouds pass across the sky, acknowledging their presence, but knowing that they are not the sky itself. When we practice this, we create a little space between ourselves and our thoughts, a space where peace can enter. Let's try a simple exercise right now. Take a deep breath in through your nose, counting to 4. Hold it for a moment, then exhale slowly through your mouth, counting to 6. As you do this, notice the sensation of the breath entering and leaving your body. Notice the rise and fall of your chest or abdomen. Now, as you continue to breathe, notice any thoughts that arise. They might be thoughts about this story, about what you need to do tomorrow, or about something that happened earlier today. Whatever they are, simply acknowledge them, then gently return your attention to your breath. This simple act of returning to the breath, whenever we notice our minds have wandered, is the essence of mindfulness practice. It's a way of emptying the cup, if only for a moment, by letting go of whatever thoughts are filling it. The scholar in our story eventually understood Nonin's teaching. He realized that his vast knowledge had become a barrier, not a path, to true understanding. In the same way, our thoughts and opinions, while sometimes useful, can become barriers to peace if we hold onto them too tightly. The Buddha taught that all phenomena are impermanent, constantly changing. This includes our thoughts, feelings, and even our sense of self. When we cling to these fleeting experiences as if they were permanent, we create suffering for ourselves. Emptying the cup is simply a way of acknowledging this impermanence, of letting go of our need to hold onto things that, by their nature, will change. Let's return to the temple room with Nanin and the scholar. After the initial shock of the spilled tea, the scholar's face softens. He looks down at his damp robes, then back at Nanin, and a small smile tugs at the corners of his mouth. "I see," he says quietly. "My cup is indeed full. Please forgive my presumption." Nonin nods, then pours a fresh cup of tea, stopping just before it overflows. He hands it to the scholar, who takes it with both hands, bowing his head in thanks. As the scholar sips the tea, he tastes not just the flavor of the leaves, but something else, a quality of presence, of being fully in the moment that he has rarely experienced before. For the first time in a long while, his mind is quiet. This is the gift of emptying the cup, not that we lose our knowledge or our ability to think, but that we free ourselves from being imprisoned by our thoughts. We learn to hold them lightly, to use them when needed, but not to be used by them. In modern psychology, this state of being is sometimes referred to as psychological flexibility, the ability to be present in the moment and to change our behavior when needed to pursue our values. Research has shown that psychological flexibility is strongly associated with well-being and resilience, and that mindfulness practices can increase this flexibility. When we are psychologically flexible, we are better able to handle the inevitable stresses and uncertainties of life. We don't get stuck in rigid patterns of thinking or behavior, but instead can adapt to new situations with greater ease. This is the practical benefit of emptying the cup. We become more responsive, less reactive, and ultimately less anxious. So, how can we cultivate this empty cup mindset in our daily lives? It begins with small moments of awareness throughout the day. Perhaps when we're washing dishes, we can really pay attention to the sensation of water on our hands, the sound of dishes clinking, the smell of soap, instead of letting our minds wander to what's next. Or when we're walking, we can notice the feeling of our feet touching the ground, the movement of our bodies, the sights and sounds around us. These small moments of presence are like little, empty cups moments, where we set aside our thoughts about the past and future and simply be with what is. Over time, these moments accumulate, and we find that we can access this state of presence more easily. even in challenging situations. Let's try another brief exercise. Bring to mind a recent situation that caused you anxiety. It might be something smaller, minor disagreement, a missed deadline, an awkward social interaction. As you think about this situation, notice what thoughts arise. Perhaps you're thinking, I should have handled that better, or what if people think less of me? Now, imagine placing these thoughts in a cup, as if they were physical objects. Hold the cup in your mind's eye for a moment, then imagine pouring its contents out, letting the thoughts flow away. Notice how your body feels as you do this, any tension that might release, any lightness that might arise. This visualization is a simple way of practicing the empty cup mindset. It reminds us that we are not our thoughts, that we can choose to let them go. The Buddha taught that the mind is everything. What you think, you become. If our minds are filled with anxiety and judgment, we will experience a world of anxiety and judgment. But if we can empty our minds, even for a moment, we create the possibility of experiencing peace and clarity. As we conclude this first story, let's take a few moments to simply be present. Notice the sounds around you, the hum of a distant appliance, the rustle of leaves, the sound of your own breath. Notice any sensations in your body, the weight of your body against the surface you're resting on, the temperature of the air against your skin, any areas of tension or relaxation. Notice any thoughts that arise, but don't engage with them, just let them come and go. Like clouds passing through the sky, remember that emptying the cup is not a one-time event, but a practice. It's something we can return to again and again. Whenever we notice that our minds are filled with thoughts that cause us suffering, each time we do this, we create a little more space for peace, a little more room for wisdom to enter. As we prepare to move to the next story, take one more deep breath in, filling your lungs completely, and then exhale slowly, releasing any tension you might be holding. Carry with you the image of the empty cup, and remember that you always have the power to set down whatever is filling your mind, if only for a moment. Now, let's journey to a mountain monastery, where a Zen master tends to his daily tasks with a presence that transforms even the most ordinary actions into acts of meditation. The mist has thickened as we journey to a mountain monastery perched on a slope overlooking a valley. The air here is cooler, carrying the sharp scent of pine and the dampness of recent rain. The path to the monastery is lined with stone lanterns, their glass panes fogged with moisture, and every step you take on the moss-covered stones makes a soft, squelching sound. Above, the branches of cedar trees weave together, creating a canopy that filters the light into a dappled green glow. As we approach the monastery gates, you hear the rhythmic sound of a woodcutter's axe striking wood, a steady thwack, thwack, thwack that echoes through the trees. The sound is surprisingly calming, each strike landing with a precision that suggests focus, not hurry. Beyond the gates, the monastery grounds are simple but well-tended, several wooden buildings with curved roofs, a small garden where vegetables grow in neat rows, and a woodpile stacked with logs, each cut to exactly the same length. The woodcutter is an elderly man with a shaved head and a face deeply lined from years of exposure to sun and wind. His robes are patched but clean, and as he swings the axe, his movements are economical, each motion flowing into the next without wasted effort. Even from a distance, you can see the concentration in his eyes, the way he focuses entirely on the task at hand. This is Beijing Weihai, a Zen master who lived in China during the 8th century. Known not for dramatic teachings or miraculous feats, but for the profound wisdom he embodied in the simplest acts of daily life. It is raining lightly now, not a heavy downpour, but a fine mist that settles on your skin like a gentle caress. Most people would seek shelter from such weather, but Bae continues his work, undisturbed. A young monk approaches him, holding an umbrella. "Master," the monk says, "why don't you come inside until the rain stops? The wood can wait." Beijing pauses, the axe halfway raised, and looks at the young monk with a calm smile. "And what would I do inside?" he asks. "You could meditate, or study the sutras," the monk replies. Beijing shakes his head and brings the axe down with a satisfying thwack, splitting a log cleanly in two. "This is my meditation," he says, gesturing to the woodpile. "This is my sutra study. When it is time to cut wood, I cut wood. When it is time to eat, I eat. When it is time to sleep, I sleep." With that, he returns to his work, the rhythm of the axe continuing as if it had never been interrupted. The young monk stands for a moment, watching, then bows and retreats, leaving Beijing alone with the rain and the wood. This simple scene captures the essence of Beijing's teaching, philosophy often summed up in the Zen saying, "When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep." It seems almost too simple, too obvious, but within this simplicity lies a profound truth about the nature of peace and, perhaps surprisingly, about overcoming insomnia. Insomnia, that most frustrating of modern afflictions, often arises from our inability to be fully present in the moment, especially when that moment is bedtime. Instead of simply being with the experience of tiredness, we fill our minds with thoughts, plans for tomorrow, worries about today, regrets about yesterday. We lie in bed, but our minds are elsewhere, caught in a loop of thinking that prevents us from falling asleep. The Buddha recognized this pattern over 2,500 years ago when he taught about the importance of right effort, one of the components of his noble eightfold path. Right effort, he explained, is not about struggling or forcing things to be a certain way, but about being fully engaged in each moment with awareness and without attachment. In the Majjhima Nikaya, a collection of the Buddha's discourses, he says, "When a monk is resting, he knows I am resting. When he is lying down, he knows I am lying down." This is how a monk abides in contemplation of the body. This practice of knowing exactly what we are doing in each moment is precisely what Beijing demonstrated in cutting wood in the rain. He was not thinking about the future, how much wood he needed to cut, or the past, how much he had already cut. He was simply cutting wood, fully present with each swing of the axe, each split log, each drop of rain on his skin. From a psychological perspective, this kind of single-pointed focus is the opposite of the scattered thinking that characterizes insomnia. When we are fully engaged in an activity, whether it's cutting wood, washing dishes, or simply breathing, we activate what neuroscientists call the task-positive network in the brain. This network, which includes parts of the prefrontal cortex and parietal lobes, is associated with focused attention and goal-directed behavior. In contrast, the default mode network of regions associated with mind-wandering and self-referential thinking becomes less active. For people who struggle with insomnia, this shift is crucial. Bedtime often becomes a time when the default mode network goes into overdrive, with thoughts racing through the mind unchecked. By learning to engage the task-positive network even in the quiet moments before sleep, we can calm this mental chatter and create the conditions for rest. Beijing's approach to daily life was so influential that he is credited with establishing the Zen monastic rules, a set of guidelines for how monks should live and work together. Central to these rules was the principle of no work, no food, the idea that every member of the community, regardless of rank or age, should contribute through manual labor. For Beijing, work was not a distraction from spiritual practice, but an essential part of it. Even in his old age, when his disciples tried to exempt him from physical labor, he continued to work, saying, "I am not special. The rules apply to me as they do to everyone else." This integration of work and spiritual practice is particularly relevant to our understanding of sleep. Just as Beijing refused to separate spiritual activities like meditation from mundane activities like cutting wood, we can learn to stop seeing sleep as a problem to be solved or a battle to be won, and instead see it as simply another part of life to be experienced with awareness. Let's think about the typical experience of insomnia. You go to bed, tired but unable to sleep. You start to worry about not sleeping, which makes it even harder to sleep. You check the clock, calculate how many hours you might still get if you fall asleep right now, which increases your anxiety. This creates a vicious cycle. The more you try to sleep, the more awake you become. This is what psychologists call performance anxiety. Anxiety about your ability to perform a specific task. In this case, the task is sleeping. The irony, of course, is that sleep is not a task to be performed, but a natural process that happens when the conditions are right. Trying to force it only creates tension, which is the opposite of what's needed for sleep. Beijing's approach suggests a different way. Instead of struggling to sleep, we can simply be with the experience of being in bed, without judgment or expectation. We can notice the sensation of the sheets against our skin, the sound of our breath, the feeling of our body growing heavy. If thoughts arise, we acknowledge them, then return to the sensations of the present moment, just as Beijing returned to cutting wood after answering his disciple. Let's try a brief exercise that captures this spirit. Take a deep breath in through your nose, feeling your chest expand. Exhale slowly through your mouth, noticing the slight coolness of the air as it leaves your body. Now, bring your attention to your hands. Notice how they feel, perhaps warm or cool, relaxed or slightly tense. Without trying to change anything, simply observe the sensation of your hands resting wherever they are. If your mind wanders, and it will, gently bring it back to the feeling of your hands. This simple practice of focusing on a neutral sensation is a form of mindfulness that can be particularly helpful at bedtime. It engages the task-positive network, quieting the default mode network's endless chatter. More importantly, it shifts our relationship to sleep. Instead of seeing it as something we need to achieve, we see it as something that may or may not happen in the course of being present. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from craving, from wanting things to be different from how they are. This includes the craving for sleep when we can't sleep. By letting go of this craving, by accepting the present moment as it is, we reduce our suffering and, paradoxically, create the conditions that make sleep more likely. Beijing's commitment to presence extended to all areas of his life, including sleep. Unlike many spiritual teachers who are said to sleep little or not at all, Beijing emphasized the importance of proper rest. He understood that just as cutting wood requires focus, so does sleeping. One cannot be fully present in work if one is exhausted, and one cannot sleep well without being present to the experience of resting. There's a story about Beijing that illustrates this point. One evening, after a long day of work, a disciple found Beijing sitting by the fire, looking unusually alert. "Master," the disciple asked, "why aren't you sleeping? You must be tired." Beijing smiled. "I am tired," he said, "but tiredness is just a sensation. I am resting now, being with this tiredness, and when it is time to sleep, I will sleep. There is no hurry." This lack of hurry, This acceptance of things as they are is perhaps the most important lesson we can learn from Beijing about overcoming insomnia. Insomnia thrives on urgency, on the feeling that we must sleep right now, that every minute awake is a minute wasted. Beijing's approach suggests that there is no right time to sleep, only the present moment, which is always perfect as it is. From a neurobiological perspective, this attitude helps to reduce activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain associated with fear and anxiety. When we stop fearing sleeplessness, when we stop seeing it as a catastrophe, the amygdala calms down, reducing the production of stress hormones like cortisol that keep us awake. This creates a feedback loop. Less anxiety leads to more relaxation, which makes sleep more likely, which in turn reduces anxiety. Beijing's method of being fully present in each activity also helps to regulate our circadian rhythms, the internal clock that regulates when we feel awake and when we feel sleepy. Our circadian rhythms are influenced by many factors, including light exposure and physical activity, but they are also sensitive to our mental state. When we are scattered and unfocused throughout the day, jumping from task to task without fully engaging in any of them, it disrupts this natural rhythm. In contrast, being fully present in each activity, whether it's working, eating, or resting, helps to synchronize our internal clock, making it easier to fall asleep at night. Let's return to the mountain monastery, where the rain has stopped and the sun is beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Beijing has finished cutting wood for the day and is now sitting on the porch of his simple hut, drinking a cup of tea. The young monk who approached him earlier is sitting beside him, looking thoughtful. "Master," the young monk says, "I have been thinking about what you said earlier, about cutting wood and sleeping." Beijing nods, encouraging him to continue. "I suffer from restlessness at night," the monk admits. "I lie awake, thinking about my practice, about my failures, about the future. I try to sleep, but the more I try, the more awake I am." Beijing takes a sip of tea, then looks at the monk with kindness. "Your problem is not that you can't sleep," he says gently. "It's that you can't rest. Even when your body is in bed, your mind is still working, still striving. You need to learn to let your mind rest, just as you let your body rest." "How?" the monk asks. "Bring the same attention to sleeping that you bring to other activities," Beijing replies. "When you walk, walk. When you sit, sit. When you lie down, lie down. Don't do anything else. Just lie down and notice that you are lying down. If thoughts come, let them come, then let them go. Return to the feeling of your body against the mattress, the sound of your breath, the darkness behind your eyes." The monk looks skeptical. "That's all," Beijing smiles. "It is all, and it is enough. The problem is not that sleeping is difficult, but that we make it difficult by thinking too much about it. Let go of your ideas about sleep, your expectations, your fears. Just be with what is, and sleep will come when it is ready." As the sun dips below the horizon, the first stars begin to appear in the sky. The monastery bell rings, signaling the end of the day. Beijing stands, stretches slowly, and bows to the monk. "Now it is time for me to rest," he says. "Will you join me in the dormitory?" The monk nods, and the two walk together through the quiet monastery grounds, their footsteps soft on the damp earth. This story offers a powerful antidote to the modern struggle with insomnia. In a world that values productivity and constant activity, we often carry this mindset into our resting hours, treating sleep as just another task to optimize. Beijing's wisdom reminds us that rest, like work, requires presence. It's not about getting enough sleep, but about being fully present in the experience of resting, whether sleep comes or not. The Buddha expressed this same idea when he taught about the middle way, the path between the extremes of indulgence and asceticism. This middle way applies to sleep as well. Neither obsessing about getting enough sleep nor forcing ourselves to stay awake, but finding a balanced approach that honors our body's natural rhythms. For those who struggle with insomnia, this approach can be transformative. Instead of dreading bedtime as a battle, we can learn to see it as an opportunity for practice, an opportunity to be fully present, to let go of the day's concerns, and to trust in the natural process of rest. Let's try another exercise that captures this approach. Imagine yourself lying in bed at night, ready to sleep. Instead of thinking about sleep, focus on the sensation of your body making contact with the mattress. Notice which parts feel heavy, which parts feel light. Notice the temperature of the air against your skin, the sound of your breath, the rhythm of your heartbeat. If thoughts arise, and they will simply note them thinking, and then return to the sensations of your body. This practice doesn't make you sleep. Instead, it creates a space of presence where sleep can happen naturally if it's meant to. And if sleep doesn't come right away, that's okay too. You're still resting, still practicing presence. And that in itself is nourishing. As we conclude this exploration of Beijing's wisdom, let's take a moment to reflect on how we can bring this kind of presence to our own lives, especially to those moments when we're trying to sleep. Perhaps it's as simple as remembering Beijing cutting wood in the rain, focused, unhurried, fully engaged in the task at hand, without worry or distraction the next time you find yourself lying awake at night. Remember, this moment is not a problem to be solved. It's just a moment to be experienced fully, without judgment. Like Beijing with his axe, you can be fully present, letting go of thoughts about the past or future, and simply resting in the now. Take a deep breath in, feeling the air fill your lungs. Exhale slowly, letting go of any tension in your body. As you breathe, imagine yourself in that mountain monastery. The air fresh with the scent of pine and rain. The world quiet, except for the gentle rustling of leaves. In this moment, there is nothing to do, nowhere to go, nothing to worry about. There is only this breath, this moment, this opportunity to be fully alive. Now, as we prepare to move to our next story, carry with you the image of Beijing in the raincom, focused, fully present. Remember that this same presence is available to you in every moment, including those moments when you're trying to sleep. Let's journey now to a quiet garden, where another Zen master is about to share a teaching through a simple act of looking at a flower in a mirror. The path from the mountain monastery winds through a dense forest, where sunlight filters through the canopy in thin golden threads. As we walk, the air shifts from the crisp pine scent of higher elevations to something softer, laced with the sweet aroma of blooming flowers. The sound of a water fountain grows louder as we emerge from the trees into a walled garden, its stone pathways lined with moss and bordered by meticulously tended beds of peonies and chrysanthemums. At the center of the garden stands a small pavilion with a curved roof, its wooden beams polished smooth by time and touch. Beneath the pavilion, a round bronze mirror rests on a low table, its surface so clear it seems to swallow the light. Beside the table sits an elderly monk with a serene expression, his eyes fixed on the mirror. This is Dongshan Liangyi, known as Dongshan, a 9th century Zen master whose teachings would later form the foundation of one of the major schools of Zen Buddhism. It is early afternoon, and the garden is bathed in warm light. A gentle breeze stirs the leaves of a nearby maple tree, and you can hear the distant call of a bird. Dongshen does not look up as we approach. His attention remains focused on the mirror, in which a single peony growing on the other side of the pavilion is reflected with perfect clarity. The flowers, petals, a deep shade of pink tinged with cream at the edges, seem to float in the polished bronze, as real as the flower itself. A young monk enters the garden, his face flushed with anger. He strides toward Dongshen, his movements sharp and tense, and stops abruptly in front of the pavilion. "Master," he says, his voice tight with emotion, "I must speak with you. The head monk has accused me of stealing. He says I took a scroll from the library, but I swear I didn't do it. He won't listen to me, and the other monks are looking at me as if I'm a thief. It's not fair." The young monk's chest rises and falls rapidly, his hands clenched at his sides. His anger is palpable, like a storm gathering, and for a moment, the peaceful garden seems to shrink around him. Dongshen continues to look at the mirror, his expression unchanged. "What do you see here?" he asks, gesturing to the reflection of the peony. The monk blinks, taken aback by the question. "I see a flower," he says, impatience edging his voice. "But that's not important. You need to help me. The head monk is wrong, and everyone thinks, is the flower in the mirror real?" Dongshen interrupts, still looking at the reflection. The monk stares at him, confused. "No, of course not. It's just a reflection." "Yet it looks real, does it not?" Dongshen says. "It has the same shape and color as the flower growing over there. If you didn't know better, you might reach for it, thinking you could pluck it from the mirror." "Well, yes," the monk admits, "but that would be foolish. It's not a real flower." "Anger is like that flower in the mirror," Dongshen says, finally looking up at the young monk. "It seems real, so real that you can feel it in your body, in your racing heart and clenched fists. But like the reflection, it is not what it appears to be. It is a shadow, a projection, arising from causes and conditions. And just as the reflection disappears when the flower is moved or the mirror is covered, so too does anger pass when you see it for what it is." The young monk frowns, his anger momentarily forgotten as he tries to understand. "But my anger is real. The head monk's accusation hurt me. That's not a reflection, that's true." "The accusation happened," Dongshen agrees. "That is a fact, like the peony growing by the pavilion. But your anger is like the reflection of the peony in the mirror. It is not the flower itself, nor is it separate from it. It is a product of the flower, the light, and the mirror coming together. In the same way, your anger arises from the accusation, your thoughts about it, and the habits of your mind. It is not fixed or permanent, and it is not who you are." The young monk sits down on the edge of the pavilion, his posture relaxing slightly as he considers this. "But how do I make it stop?" he asks. "It feels so strong, like it's controlling me." Dongshen turns back to the mirror. "Do you try to make the reflection disappear by hitting the mirror?" he asks. "Of course not," the monk says. "That would be silly. The reflection isn't really there. Hitting the mirror would only break it." "Yet that is what you do with your anger," Dongshen replies. "You fight against it. You struggle with it. You tell yourself you shouldn't feel it, and in doing so, you only make it stronger. Like the reflection, anger is a temporary phenomenon. It arises and it passes if you let it. The problem is not the anger itself, but your attachment to it, your belief that it is real and that it defines you." This teaching from Dongshan touches on a fundamental insight in Buddhist psychology, that our emotions, including anger, are not fixed states but fleeting experiences, arising from a complex interplay of thoughts, sensations, and external events. The Buddha taught this in his doctrine of dependent origination, the idea that all phenomena, including our mental states, arise in dependence on other phenomena, and thus have no independent existence. In the Pali Canon, the Buddha describes anger as a poison that harms the one who holds it more than the one it is directed against. He says, when a person gives way to anger, they are like a person who picks up a burning coal to throw at someone else. They are the first to get burned. This image captures the self-destructive nature of anger, which often causes us more suffering than the situation that triggered it. From a modern psychological perspective, anger is a natural emotional response to perceived threats or injustices. It activates the body's sympathetic nervous system, releasing adrenaline and preparing us for action or response, often called the fight or flight reaction. In this way, anger can be protective, alerting us to boundaries that have been crossed or needs that are not being met. The problem arises not with anger itself, but with how we relate to it. When we become identified with our anger, when we think, I am angry rather than I am experiencing anger, we enter what psychologists call an emotional fusion state. In this state, the anger takes over, clouding our judgment and leading us to act in ways that are not aligned with our values. We may say things we regret, damage relationships, or make decisions that harm ourselves or others. Neuroscientists have identified the amygdala, the small almond-shaped structure in the brain involved in processing emotions, as a key player in the anger response. When we perceive a threat, the amygdala sends a signal to the hypothalamus, which triggers the release of stress hormones. This happens quickly, often before the more rational prefrontal cortex has time to evaluate the situation. This amygdala hijack, as it's sometimes called, can lead us to react impulsively without thinking. The practice of mindfulness, which Dongshan is essentially teaching the young monk, helps to activate the prefrontal cortex, allowing us to respond to anger rather than react to it. By observing anger without judgment, by seeing it as a temporary sensation in the body rather than an integral part of our identity, we create a space between the trigger and our response. This space is where freedom lies, the freedom to choose how we will act, rather than being controlled by our emotions. Let's try a brief exercise to explore this. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, bring to mind a recent situation that made you angry. It doesn't have to be a major incident. Perhaps someone cut you off in traffic or said something that hurt your feelings. As you recall this situation, notice what happens in your body. Do you feel tension in your chest or shoulders? A tightness in your jaw? A warmth spreading through your body? These are the physical sensations associated with anger. Now, instead of focusing on the situation or the person who triggered your anger, simply focus on these sensations. Notice them without judgment, as if you were a scientist observing a phenomenon. Label them if it helps: tension, tightness, warmth. As you do this, you may notice that the sensations begin to change or fade. This is because you're no longer feeding the anger with your thoughts and stories. You're simply allowing it to be, and in doing so, you're giving it permission to pass. This is essentially what Dongshan is teaching the young monk: to see anger as a passing phenomenon, like the reflection of a flower in a mirror, rather than a fixed reality. It's not about suppressing or denying anger, but about relating to it in a way that doesn't cause further suffering. Let's return to the garden, where the young monk is sitting quietly, his hands unclenched. The flush has faded from his cheeks, and his breathing has slowed. "I think I understand," he says after a moment. "My anger is like the reflection in the mirror. It seems real, but it's not. It's just there, for now." Dongshin nods. "You are getting closer," he says. "But remember, the reflection is not an illusion. It is a real reflection, arising from real causes. In the same way, your anger is a real experience, but it is not who you are. You are the one who sees the anger, just as you are the one who sees the reflection in the mirror." The young monk looks confused again. "But if I'm not my anger, then who am I?" Dongshin points to the mirror. "Who is it that sees the reflection?" he asks. "The mirror does not see itself, nor does the flower. There is a seer, separate from the reflection, who is aware of it." The monk sits in silence, pondering this question. A butterfly lands on a nearby flower. Its wings are vibrant orange and black, and for a moment, both he and Dongjin watch it, the garden falling quiet except for the sound of the fountain. This question, who is the one who is aware, lies at the heart of many Zen teachings. It points to the idea that our true nature is not our thoughts, emotions, or sensations, but the awareness that observes them. This awareness is like the mirror itself, which remains unchanged regardless of what is reflected in it. It is clear, spacious, and unconditionally present, allowing all experiences to arise and pass without clinging or resistance. From a psychological perspective, this awareness is similar to what is called meta-awareness, the ability to be aware of our own thoughts and feelings as they occur. Research has shown that meta-awareness is associated with emotional regulation, self-control, and overall well-being. It allows us to step back from our emotions, to see them as temporary mental events rather than absolute truths. For the young monk, this insight is transformative. Instead of being caught up in his anger, seeing it as a fixed part of his identity, he begins to recognize that he is the awareness that observes the anger. This creates a shift in his relationship to the emotion, a shift from identification to observation, from being controlled by anger to being able to respond to it with wisdom. The Buddha taught that this kind of insight is the key to liberation from suffering. In the Dhammapada, he says, "As a mirror is stained by dust, so the mind is stained by anger. As a mirror is cleaned by water, so the mind is cleaned by wisdom." This wisdom is not abstract knowledge, but the direct experience of seeing things as they are, including our own emotions. Let's try another exercise to cultivate this kind of awareness. Close your eyes for a moment and take a few deep breaths. Now, bring to mind a current source of anger or frustration in your life. It might be a difficult relationship, a work situation, or a personal challenge. As you think about this, notice the emotions that arise. Now, instead of getting caught up in the story of why you're angry, simply observe the emotions as energy in your body. Notice where you feel them most strongly. Now, ask yourself, who is aware of these feelings? This question is not meant to have an intellectual answer, but to point you to the awareness itself, the silent witness that is aware of the anger, but is not the anger. Rest in this awareness for a moment, allowing the anger to be there without judgment or resistance. You may notice that as you do this, the anger loses some of its power. It is no longer your anger, but simply an energy moving through the field of awareness. Like a cloud passing through the sky, this is the freedom that comes from seeing things as they are, not denying reality, but relating to it with wisdom and compassion. Back in the garden, the young monk stands up, bowing deeply to Dongshin. "Thank you, Master," he says, his voice calm and steady. "I see now that my anger was just a reflection. It didn't define me, and it didn't change the truth of what happened." "And what is the truth of what happened?" Dongshan asks. "The head monk accused me of something I didn't do," the monk replies. "That is a fact. But my anger about it was just a reflection in my mind, like the flower in the mirror. It arose, and now it is passing. I can speak to him calmly, without anger, and set the record straight." Dongshan smiles. "You have learned well," he says. "Remember, the mirror does not judge what is reflected in it. It simply reflects, without clinging or pushing away. Be like the mirror, and you will find peace, even in the midst of conflict." The young monk bows again and turns to leave, his steps light and purposeful. As he walks out of the garden, the sunlight catches his face, and he looks lighter, as if a heavy burden has been lifted. Dongshan returns his attention to the mirror, where the peony is still reflected with perfect clarity. A breeze stirs the flower, and the reflection moves in response, rippling gently across the surface of the bronze. The mirror remains unchanged, simply reflecting what is, without attachment or resistance. This is the wisdom of the flower in the mirror, that our emotions, like reflections, are temporary and impermanent, arising from causes and conditions, but lacking any inherent existence. When we see them for what they are, when we recognize that we are the awareness that observes them, they lose their power to control us. We can respond to life's challenges with clarity and compassion, rather than reacting with anger or fear. For those who struggle with anger, whether it's occasional frustration or deep-seated resentment, this teaching offers a path to freedom. It is not about suppressing anger or pretending it doesn't exist, but about relating to it in a way that allows us to act with wisdom and integrity. It is about recognizing that anger is a messenger, pointing to what matters to us, but that we are not bound to follow its dictates. As we conclude this exploration of Dongshan's teaching, let's take a moment to reflect on our own relationship with anger. What situations trigger anger in us? How do we typically respond? Can we learn to see our anger as a reflection in a mirror, real in its appearance, but ultimately a temporary phenomenon arising in the field of awareness? The next time you feel anger arising, remember the flower in the mirror. Pause for a moment, take a breath, and recognize that you are the awareness that observes the anger. Allow it to be there without judgment, and trust that it will pass, like all phenomena. In this way, you can respond to life's challenges with the same calm clarity that Dongshan demonstrated in the garden, rooted in the wisdom of seeing things as they are. Take a deep breath in, feeling the air fill your lungs with fresh energy. Exhale slowly, releasing any tension or anger that may be stored in your body. As you breathe, imagine yourself as the mirror in Dongshan's garden, clear, spacious, and unconditionally present, allowing all experiences to arise and pass without clinging or resistance. Now, as we prepare to move to our next story, carry with you the image of the flower in the mirror. Remember that your emotions, like the reflection, are not who you are, but simply passing phenomena in the field of awareness. This recognition is the first step toward freedom from anger and toward a life lived with greater peace and wisdom. Let's journey now to a quiet temple where another Zen master is about to share a profound teaching through the power of silence. The path from Dongshan's garden leads us through a village where the scent of cooking rice hangs in the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of freshly turned soil. Children laugh as they chase each other through narrow lanes, their voices echoing off the wooden walls of the houses. We pass an old woman sitting on a stool outside her home, weaving a basket from reeds, her fingers moving with the practiced ease of a lifetime's work. She looks up as we walk by, offering a warm smile before returning to her task. Beyond the village, a stone bridge crosses a small river, its waters clear and shallow, revealing smooth stones and darting fish. On the other side of the bridge, a temple comes into view, its roof tiles weathered to a soft grey by the passage of time. This is Jiaozhou Temple, home to one of the most revered Zen masters in history, Jiaozhou Kongshen, often simply called Zhaozhou. As we enter the temple grounds, we find ourselves in a courtyard where several monks are engaged in quiet activity. One sweeps the flagstones with a straw broom, his movements slow and deliberate, as if each stroke is a meditation. Another tends to a small patch of herbs, bending down to gently remove weeds with his fingers. The air here is still, with a sense of calm that seems to settle over everything like a soft blanket. At the far end of the courtyard, beneath a gnarled plum tree that has seen many seasons, sits an elderly monk. His back is straight, his posture radiating a quiet strength, and his eyes, though clouded with age, hold a spark of mischief and wisdom. This is Jiaozhou, who at over 100 years old is still teaching, still challenging his students to go beyond the limits of their thinking. A young monk approaches Jiaozhou, his face troubled. He bows deeply, then sits down across from the master, folding his hands in his lap. "Master," he begins, his voice hesitant, "I have been struggling with a question that disturbs my peace. I have tried to find an answer through study and meditation, but it only seems to grow more confusing. Please help me." Jiaozhou nods, gesturing for him to continue. "The question is this," the young monk says, leaning forward slightly. "Does a dog have Buddha nature?" This question, simple as it seems, is one of the most famous in Zen Buddhism. Buddha nature, or Buddha-tu in Sanskrit, is the idea that all beings possess the potential for enlightenment, the same essence that awakened in the Buddha. It is a fundamental concept in Mahayana Buddhism, suggesting that enlightenment is not something we gain from outside ourselves, but something we uncover within. The young monk has likely studied the teachings that explicitly state all sentient beings have Buddha nature. Yet, he also senses the complexity beneath this simple statement. If all beings have Buddha nature, what does that mean for animals, for insects, for those who commit great harm? His mind spins with these questions, creating a tangled web of doubt and confusion. Jiaozhou looks at the young monk for a long moment, his gaze steady and penetrating. Then, in a voice that is both gruff and gentle, he replies with a single word, "Mu." Mu is a Japanese word meaning no or not, but in this context, it is much more than a simple negation. It is a Kona paradoxical question or statement, designed to disrupt conventional thinking and trigger a direct insight into the nature of reality. Jiaozhou's Mu is perhaps the most famous koan in Zen, studied by practitioners for centuries as a path to awakening. The young monk sits back, clearly confused. "But Master," he says, "the sutras say that all sentient beings have Buddha nature. How can you say no?" Jiaozhou does not answer. He simply looks at the monk, his expression unreadable. The monk persists, his voice rising slightly with frustration. "If a dog does not have Buddha nature, then what of other animals? What of humans? Does the Buddha nature exist or not? Please, I need an answer." Still, Jiaozhou remains silent, his gaze unwavering. The young monk shifts uncomfortably, his mind racing as he tries to make sense of this response or lack thereof. He thinks of all the arguments he could make, all the passages from the sutras he could quote. But, as he meets Jiaozhou's calm gaze, his words seem to evaporate, leaving only a sense of emptiness. In this silence, something begins to shift. The monk's confusion is still there, but beneath it, he feels a strange sense of calm, as if the storm of his thoughts is beginning to settle. He realizes that his question is not really about dogs or Buddha nature at all. It is about his own need for certainty, his own desire to grasp and control reality through concepts and ideas. This is the power of Jiaozhou's mu and his subsequent silence. It does not provide an intellectual answer, because the question itself arises from a misunderstanding of the nature of Buddha nature. Buddha nature is not a thing that can be possessed or lacked, like a coin in one's pocket. It is the very essence of being, the ground of all existence, which cannot be captured in words or concepts. By answering mu and then falling silent, Jiaozhou points the young monk beyond his conceptual mind to the direct experience of this truth. The Buddha himself recognized the limitations of language when it comes to describing the ultimate truth. In the Diamond Sutra, he says, "What is called the path of the Buddhas is not a path. Therefore, it is called a path." This paradoxical statement suggests that any attempt to define or conceptualize the path to enlightenment immediately misses the mark, because the path is beyond all concepts. Similarly, Buddha nature cannot be reduced to having or not having. It is the very ground of being that allows such concepts to arise. From a psychological perspective, the young monk is caught in what cognitive psychologists call conceptual fusion, the tendency to become entangled in our thoughts and treat them as absolute truths rather than mental constructs. This fusion creates inner conflict, as our minds try to resolve the contradictions and ambiguities that are inherent in life. We want reality to fit neatly into our conceptual boxes, and when it doesn't, we experience confusion, anxiety, and frustration. The Koan practice, with its use of paradox and silence, is designed to break this conceptual fusion by presenting the mind with a question that cannot be answered through logical reasoning. It forces us to let go of our attachment to concepts and enter a state of beginner's mind, a state of openness and curiosity, free from preconceptions. This is similar to what psychologists call cognitive diffusion, the ability to see thoughts as thoughts rather than as facts. Research has shown that practices emphasizing cognitive diffusion can reduce anxiety, depression, and rumination. By learning to step back from our thoughts and see them as mental events rather than absolute truths, we reduce their power to control us. We create space between ourselves and our thoughts, allowing us to respond to life with greater flexibility and wisdom. Let's explore this with a brief exercise. Think of a question or issue that is causing inner conflict for you right now. It might be a decision you need to make, a relationship problem, or a doubt about your path in life. Notice how your mind tries to solve this problem, how it weighs different options, how it creates arguments for and against. Notice the tension this creates in your body, the tightness in your chest, the furrow in your brow, the restlessness in your legs. Now, instead of trying to find an answer, simply say mu to yourself. Let this word be a reminder that your thoughts and concepts are not the reality they seek to describe. Let it create a space between you and your thinking. Notice what happens to the tension in your body as you do this. Notice if there's a sense of relief, however small, in letting go of the need to find an answer. This is the essence of working with the Mu Koan. It is not about figuring out what Jiaozhou meant, but about using the koan as a mirror to see the workings of your own mind your attachment to concepts, your need for certainty, your resistance to ambiguity. Let's return to the temple courtyard, where the afternoon sun has shifted, casting longer shadows across the flagstones. The young monk has been sitting in silence for a long time, his eyes closed, his posture relaxed. When he opens his eyes, there is a new clarity in his gaze, a softness around his mouth that was not there before. "I think I understand," he says quietly, though he is not sure what exactly he understands. It is not an intellectual insight, but a felt sense, a knowing that lies beyond words. Zhao smiles, a small, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. "What do you understand?" he asks. The monk opens his mouth to reply, then stops. He realizes that any words he could say would only limit this understanding, would reduce it to a concept. Instead, he simply bows deeply, his gratitude expressed not in words but in the sincerity of his gesture. Zhao nods, acknowledging the bow. "Remember this moment," he says. "When the mind is empty of questions, truth reveals itself." This exchange points to a fundamental truth in Zen, that the deepest wisdom cannot be expressed in words. It is a direct experience, a realization that comes when the conceptual mind falls silent. This is why silence is such an important part of Zen practice. In silence, we are not distracted by the noise of our thoughts or the words of others. We are able to meet reality as it is, without the filter of concepts and beliefs. The Buddha recognized the power of silence in his own teaching. There is a famous story of the Buddha holding up a flower and saying nothing, a gesture that was understood only by Mahakasyapa, who smiled, indicating his direct insight. This flower sermon is seen as the origin of Zen, emphasizing the transmission of wisdom beyond words. From a neuroscientific perspective, silence activates different brain regions than speech or even listening. Studies have shown that periods of silence can increase activity in the default mode network, but in a way that is more integrated and less fragmented than the mind wandering that often occurs when we're not focused. This kind of silence can lead to a sense of peace and integration, as the brain processes information without the constant input of external stimuli or internal chatter. For the young monk, Zhao's silence is more powerful than any words could be. It creates a container for his confusion, allowing it to unfold and eventually dissolve into a deeper understanding. It teaches him that sometimes the most profound answer is no answer at all, that the truth he seeks is not in the resolution of his questions, but in the space between them. This is particularly relevant for those who struggle with inner Vingen, conflict, or turmoil. Our minds are often filled with competing thoughts, desires, and beliefs, creating a constant state of inner chatter that leaves us feeling exhausted and divided. We try to resolve this conflict through thinking, but the more we think, the more tangled we become. Zhao's teaching suggests a different approach. Instead of trying to resolve our inner conflicts through thinking, we can learn to rest in the silence that underlies all thoughts. This silence is not the absence of sound, but a state of awareness that is free from the compulsion to judge, analyze, and control. It is the ground of our being, where all conflicts dissolve into the recognition of our fundamental wholeness. Let's try another exercise to connect with this silence. Find a comfortable position and take a few deep breaths, allowing your body to relax. Now, instead of focusing on your breath or any object, simply allow your awareness to expand to include all sounds, sensations, and thoughts without focusing on any of them. Imagine yourself as a vast sky, and your thoughts as clouds passing through. The sky does not judge the clouds, nor does it try to make them go away. It simply holds them in its spaciusness. As you rest in this awareness, notice the silence that is always present beneath the noise of your thoughts. It is the silence between words, the pause between breaths, the stillness that allows all experience to arise. This silence is your true nature, unchanging and undisturbed by the comings and goings of your mind. Back in the temple courtyard, the sun is beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The young monk stands up, bowing again to Jojo. "Thank you, Master," he says, his voice quiet and reverent. "Your answer has taught me more than 1,000 words." Jojo grunts, a sound that might be a laugh. "I gave no answer," he says. "Exactly," the monk replies, a smile spreading across his face. With that, he turns and walks away, his steps light and purposeful, his mind clear for the first time in weeks. He knows that his questions have not been answered in the way he expected, but they have been transformed. He no longer needs to grasp for answers, because he has discovered the silence in which all answers arise. Jojo watches him go, then turns his gaze to the plum tree, its branches bare but full of the promise of spring. He sits there for a long time as the light fades and the first stars begin to appear in the sky. In this silence, there is no need for words, no need for understanding. There is only the simple presence of being, which is more than enough. This is the wisdom of the silent answer, that the truth we seek is not found in the noise of our thoughts, but in the silence beneath them. It is not something we can grasp with our minds, but something we can rest in, knowing that all questions arise and pass, while the silence remains, unchanging and unshakable. For those who struggle with inner conflict, this teaching offers a profound freedom. It invites us to stop fighting with our thoughts, to stop trying to resolve the unresolvable, and instead to discover the silence that is always present. In this silence, we realize that our inner conflicts are not a problem to be solved, but a gateway to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the nature of reality. As we conclude this exploration of Jojo's Moo, let's take a moment to rest in this silence. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable, and simply notice the sounds around you, the sensations in your body, the thoughts in your mind without engaging with any of them. Allow yourself to be the silent witness, the spacious awareness that holds all experience without judgment or resistance. The next time you find yourself caught in inner conflict, remember Jojo's silent answer. Instead of trying to resolve the conflict through thinking, take a breath and return to the silence. In this silence, you will find that the conflict is not as solid as it seems, that it is simply a play of thoughts and feelings arising in the vastness of your awareness. Take a deep breath in, feeling the air fill your lungs with peace. Exhale, slowly releasing any tension or struggle in your mind. As you breathe, imagine yourself sitting beneath that plum tree with Jojo, surrounded by silence that is full of meaning, a silence that teaches more than any words ever could. Now, as we prepare to move to our next story, carry with you the memory of this silence. Remember that no matter how noisy your mind may be, there is always a place of quiet within you, a place where all conflicts dissolve and peace reigns. This place is always available to you, in every moment, if you simply remember to return to it. Let's journey now to a forest, where a Zen master finds wisdom in the simple act of watching leaves fall. The path from Zhaozhou Temple winds through a forest that grows denser with each step. The trees tower above, their crowns interlocking to form a canopy that filters the sunlight into a mosaic of light and shadow. The air here is cool and moist, carrying the earthy scent of decomposing leaves and the faint sweetness of wild berries. The forest floor is carpeted with a thick layer of fallen leaves, red, gold, and brown, softening your footsteps to a whisper. Somewhere in the distance, a woodpecker taps against a tree trunk, its rhythm steady and persistent, like a metronome marking the passage of time. A squirrel scurries up a pine tree, pausing midway to chatter at you before disappearing into the branches. This is a place of constant motion and change, yet there is also a profound sense of stability, as if the forest itself holds the wisdom of ages in its roots. As you walk deeper into the forest, you come upon a small clearing. In the center of the clearing, a man sits cross-legged on a bed of moss, his posture relaxed yet alert. He is wearing simple robes of indigo-dyed cotton, and his head is shaved, revealing a scar that runs from his forehead to the back of his skull, reminder of a childhood illness that nearly took his life. This is Dogen Zenji, one of the most influential Zen masters in Japanese history, who traveled to China to study Zen before returning to establish the Soto school of Zen Buddhism. Dogen is not meditating in the traditional sense, with his eyes closed and his attention turned inward. Instead, his gaze is soft and unfocused, taking in the entire clearing, the trees, the sky, the fallen leaves, the insects crawling across the forest floor. He is practicing what he called shikantaza, just sitting, a form of meditation where one rests in open awareness without focusing on any particular object. As you watch, a gentle breeze stirs the trees, and a shower of leaves drifts down from the branches, spinning and twirling in the air before settling softly on the ground. Dogen's eyes follow their descent, his expression calm and attentive, as if he is witnessing something sacred. A young nun approaches the clearing, her footsteps careful to avoid disturbing the silence. She is carrying a small basket filled with mushrooms she has gathered, and her face is lined with worry. She stops at the edge of the clearing, bowing deeply to Dogen before sitting down a few feet away. "Master Dogen," she says, her voice barely above a whisper, "I have been troubled by fear. Fear of death, fear of change, fear of losing those I love. No matter how much I meditate, the fear returns, like a shadow that follows me wherever I go. Please, can you teach me how to be free from fear?" Dogen does not answer immediately. He continues to watch as another leaf detaches from a branch and floats to the ground. When he speaks, his voice is as soft as the rustling of leaves. "Look at the leaves," he says. The nun follows his gaze, but she sees only leaves falling, a common occurrence in autumn. "I see them, Master," she says, "but what do they have to do with my fear?" "Do the leaves fear falling?" Dogen asks. The nun frowns, confused by the question. "Leaves are not alive, Master. They do not feel fear." "Are you so sure?" Dogen replies. "They live, they grow, they change color, they fall. In their own way, they have a life cycle, just as we do. Yet they do not resist the process. They do not cling to the branches when the time comes to fall. They surrender to the natural order of things." He pauses, reaching down to pick up a fallen leaf, a maple leaf, its edges curled and brittle, its color a deep, rich red. He holds it up, letting the light shine through its thin veins. "This leaf was once green, full of life and vitality," he says. "It helped the tree to breathe, to grow. Now its time has come to fall. It will decompose, returning its nutrients to the soil, feeding the tree and the other plants. In this way, it continues to live, Even after falling, he lets the leaf fall from his hand, and it drifts down to join the others on the ground. The leaf does not fear death because it understands that death is not an end. Dogen continues, it is part of a larger process, a cycle of birth, growth, decay, and rebirth. The leaf does not cling to its form as a leaf because it knows that it is part of something greater, the tree, the forest, the entire web of life. The nun listens, but her brow remains furrowed. But I am not a leaf, master. I have consciousness. I have memories, attachments, a sense of self. I fear losing all of that. I fear the unknown that lies beyond death. Dogen nods, acknowledging her words with a gentle smile. Your fear arises because you believe that you are a separate self, a fixed entity that can be lost or destroyed. But this is an illusion. Like the leaf, you are part of a larger process, a web of interconnectedness that spans all time and space. You are born from your parents, who were born from their parents, and so on, back through the generations. You are made of the same elements as the earth, the water, the air. When you die, those elements will return to the earth to be used again in new forms of life. In this way, you are eternal, even as your individual form changes. This teaching lies at the heart of Dogen's philosophy, the idea that all phenomena are interconnected and interdependent, and that there is no fixed, separate self. This is not just a metaphysical concept, but a direct experience that can be realized through meditation. When we rest in open awareness, we begin to sense our connection to all things, dissolving the illusion of separation that is the root of so much suffering. The Buddha taught this same truth in his doctrine of unnetta, or no self. He argued that there is no permanent, unchanging self, but rather a constantly changing flow of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions. Our sense of self is a mental construct, a story we tell ourselves, but it is not the ultimate reality. When we cling to this story, we create suffering for ourselves, especially when faced with the inevitable changes of life, including illness, aging, and death. From a psychological perspective, the fear of death and change is deeply rooted in our sense of self-preservation. This is a primal instinct, hardwired into our brains through millions of years of evolution. The amygdala, that same part of the brain involved in the anger response, is also responsible for processing fear, and it activates a similar fight-or-flight response when we perceive a threat to our survival. However, much of our fear is not based on immediate physical threats, but on imagined future scenarios. This is where the default mode network, brain regions associated with mind-wandering and self-referential thinking, comes into play. Our minds are constantly projecting into the future, imagining worst-case scenarios and generating fear in response to situations that may never happen. Dogen's teaching offers a powerful antidote to this kind of fear. By recognizing our interconnectedness with all life and our participation in the natural cycle of change, we begin to dissolve the illusion of a separate self that needs to be protected. We realize that change is not a threat, but a natural part of existence, and that our true nature is not limited to our individual form. Let's try a brief exercise to connect with this truth. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, bring to mind something you fear losing: a person, a possession, a job, your health, even your own life. Notice how this fear feels in your body, the tightness in your chest, the tension in your shoulders, the rapid heartbeat. Now, imagine that this thing you fear losing is like a leaf on a tree. It is part of you, but it is not the whole of you. just as the leaf is connected to the tree, which is connected to the forest, which is connected to the earth, so too are you connected to something larger than yourself, to your family, your community, the natural world, the entire universe. As you hold this image, take another deep breath, and with your exhale, imagine releasing your grip on this thing you fear losing. Imagine surrendering to the natural flow of life, trusting that even if it changes or disappears, you will continue to be part of the larger whole. Notice if there's a sense of relief, however small, in this surrender. This is the practice of accepting impermanence, of learning to flow with the changes of life, rather than resisting them. It does not mean that we become passive or indifferent, but that we engage with life fully, while recognizing that all things are temporary. Let's return to the forest clearing, where the sun has shifted and the light has grown warmer. The nun has been sitting quietly, watching the leaves fall and pondering Dogen's words. "I think I understand a little," she says. "My fear comes from clinging to my life, to my loved ones, to my sense of self. But nothing is permanent, and clinging only causes suffering." Dogen nods. "Clinging is like trying to hold water in your hands," he says. "The tighter you grip, the more it slips through your fingers. To truly appreciate water, you must let it flow through your hands, trusting that it will return to the river, to the ocean, and eventually to the sky, where it will fall again as rain." He pauses, looking up at the sky. This is what the leaves know instinctively. They do not cling to the branches because they trust in the cycle of life. They know that falling is not an end, but a transformation. The nun looks down at the basket of mushrooms in her lap, then back up at Dogen. "But how do I learn to trust in the cycle when I cannot see what comes after? How do I let go of my fear of the unknown?" Dogen smiles gently. "You do not need to see what comes after," he says. "You only need to trust what is happening now. The leaf does not need to know where it will land or how it will decompose. It only needs to fall in this moment with complete trust." He reaches out and touches a blade of grass growing up through the layer of fallen leaves. "Look at this grass," he says. "It grows from the soil, which is nourished by the fallen leaves. The leaves give their life to the grass, which in turn will die and nourish the soil. There is no separation, no loss, only transformation." The nun closes her eyes, and for a few moments she sits in silence, breathing deeply. When she opens her eyes, there is a new softness in her gaze, a sense of peace that was not there before. "I will try to be like the leaf," she says, "to live fully, to let go without fear, to trust in the cycle of life." Dogen nods. "Remember," he says, "the leaf does not try to be anything other than what it is. It simply is, in each moment. That is the secret to freedom from fear, to be fully present, to embrace each moment as it is, without clinging to what was or fearing what will be." As the afternoon wears on, the two sit in silence, watching the leaves fall and the light change. The nun's fear has not disappeared completely, but it has softened, like a storm that has passed, leaving behind a sense of calm and clarity. She knows that the fear may return, but now she has a way to meet it, not by fighting it or running from it, but by recognizing it as part of the natural ebb and flow of life, and by returning to the present moment, where peace is always available. This is the wisdom of the fallen leaves, that life is a cycle of constant change, and that true freedom comes not from resisting this change, but from embracing it. It is a wisdom that can help us to face our fears of death, of loss, of the unknown with courage and grace. The Buddha expressed this same wisdom when he taught the 3 marks of existence: impermanence, suffering, and no self. He taught that suffering arises when we cling to things that are impermanent, when we resist the natural flow of life. But when we recognize the impermanent nature of all things and let go of our attachment to them, we can find peace, even in the midst of change. From a neuroscientific perspective, practicing acceptance of impermanence can actually rewire our brains, reducing activity in the amygdala, the fear center, and increasing activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is associated with rational thinking and emotional regulation. This allows us to respond to change with greater calm and resilience, rather than reacting with fear and resistance. Let's try another exercise to cultivate this kind of acceptance. Find a comfortable position and take a few deep breaths, allowing your body to relax. Now, bring to mind a change that is happening in your life: a job transition, a relationship ending, a move to a new place, or simply the passage of time as you grow older. Instead of resisting this change or fearing what it may bring, try to meet it with the same openness and acceptance that Dogen showed toward the falling leaves. Imagine yourself as a leaf, surrendering to the natural flow of life, trusting that this change is part of a larger process. Even if you cannot see where it will lead, notice any resistance that arises and simply observe it without judgment. Let it be there, like a leaf that is not yet ready to fall. With each breath, imagine softening into the present moment, where change is happening, but where there is also stability and peace. Back in the forest clearing, the sun is beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. The nun stands up, bowing deeply to Dogen. "Thank you, Master," she says, her voice steady and calm. "I will carry the lesson of the falling leaves in my heart." Dogen nods, his gaze still fixed on the clearing. "Remember," he says, "you are already like the leaf. You are falling and growing and changing even now. There is nothing to fear and nothing to attain. Just be in this moment, fully and completely." The nun smiles, a genuine smile that reaches her eyes, before turning to leave the clearing, her basket of mushrooms in hand. As she walks away, a leaf falls gently on her shoulder, as if in blessing. Dogen continues to sit, watching as the last of the sunlight fades from the sky and the first stars begin to twinkle in the darkness. He knows that the forest will change with the seasons, that the leaves will decompose, that new growth will emerge in spring, that the cycle will continue, and he knows that he, too, is part of this cycle, that his body will eventually return to the earth, feeding the forest just as the leaves do. In this knowledge, there is no fear, only peace, a deep, abiding peace that comes from surrendering to the natural order of things, from recognizing that we are all part of something greater than ourselves. This is the wisdom of fallen leaves returning to their roots, that death is not an end, but a homecoming, that change is not a threat, but a natural part of life, that our true nature is not limited to our individual form, but is as vast and interconnected as the forest itself. As we conclude this exploration of Dogen's teaching, let's take a moment to connect with this truth. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable and take a few deep breaths, allowing your body to relax. Imagine yourself as a leaf on a tree, connected to something larger than yourself, part of a vast and beautiful cycle of life. The next time you feel fear arising, fear of death, fear of change, fear of the unknown, remember the falling leaves. Remember that you are part of a natural process, that change is inevitable, and that your true nature is not limited to your individual form. Surrender to the flow of life, trust in the cycle, and rest in the peace of the present moment. Take a deep breath in, feeling the air fill your lungs with the energy of life. Exhale slowly, releasing any fear or resistance you may be holding. As you breathe, imagine yourself as a leaf, falling gently to the ground, trusting that you are exactly where you need to be, part of a process that is wise and beautiful beyond understanding. Now, as we prepare to move to our next story, carry with you the image of the falling leaves and the peace that comes from surrendering to the natural order of things. Remember that you are part of something greater, something eternal, even as your individual form changes. Let's journey now to a bustling market town, where a Zen master teaches a valuable lesson about finding stability in chaos. The path from Dogon's forest clearing leads us out of the quiet woods and into the lively bustle of a market town. The transition is abrupt. One moment, you're surrounded by the soft sounds of nature, and the next, you're immersed in the cacophony of human activity. Vendors shout out their wares, children run through the streets, laughing and chasing each other, and the air is filled with the mingling scents of fresh bread, spices, and livestock. The town is built around a central square, where a well stands, with a wooden bucket hanging from a rope, its surface covered in a fine layer of dust. Around the square, merchants have set up stalls selling everything from hand-woven cloth and pottery to fresh vegetables and dried fish. The ground is packed earth, churned into mud in places by the constant traffic of people and animals, and the buildings are a mix of wood and stone, their exteriors weathered by sun and rain. In the midst of this chaos, sitting on a wooden stool outside a small tea shop, is a man whose presence seems to contradict the surrounding commotion. He is wearing a simple robe, but there is an intensity in his gaze, a sharpness in his features that suggests a mind that does not tolerate fools. This is Linji Yixuan, known as Linji, the founder of the Linji school of Zen Buddhism, which emphasizes sudden enlightenment and direct, often confrontational teaching methods. Linji is watching the crowd with a calm, observant eye, as if he is studying a complex puzzle. A pot of tea sits beside him on a low table, along with a single cup, plain, unadorned, made from rough clay. Every so often, he pours himself a cup, sipping slowly and deliberately, seemingly unaffected by the noise and activity around him. A traveler, clearly overwhelmed by the chaos of the market, approaches Linji, looking exhausted and disoriented. He is carrying a large pack on his back, and his clothes are dusty and disheveled. He pauses in front of the tea shop, leaning against a wooden post to catch his breath. "Excuse me," he says to Linji, "can you tell me where I might find a quiet place to rest? This town is so noisy, so chaotic, I can't think straight." Linji looks up at him, his eyes sharp but not unkind. "And where do you think you will find such a place?" he asks. "I don't know," the traveler admits. "Perhaps a temple on the outskirts of town, or a quiet inn." Linji pours himself another cup of tea, then gestures for the traveler to sit down on a nearby stool. Reluctantly, the traveler complies, setting his pack on the ground beside him. "Do you see this cup?" Linji asks, holding up the clay cup. The traveler nods. "Yes, watch," Linji says. He stands up, walking over to the edge of the square, where a group of children are playing with a ball. He waits until the ball comes rolling toward him, then kicks it firmly toward his table. The ball flies through the air, narrowly missing a passing merchant, and crashes into the table, knocking over the teacup. Tea spills across the table, and the cup falls to the ground, bouncing once before coming to rest, unbroken. The traveler jumps to his feet, startled. "What are you doing?" he exclaims. "You nearly hit someone, and you spilled your tea." Lingi ignores his outburst, bending down to pick up the cup. He wipes it off with his sleeve, then walks back to the well, filling it with water before returning to the table and pouring the water out. He sets the empty cup back on the table, then looks at the traveler. "Did the cup break?" he asks. "No," the traveler says, still annoyed, "but that was unnecessary. You could have hurt someone." "Did the cup spill the tea?" Lingi asks. "No, the ball knocked it over," the traveler replies. "Ah," Lingi says, sitting down again. "So the cup did not break, and the cup did not spill the tea. It simply responded to the conditions around it, first being filled with tea, then being knocked over by a ball, then being emptied and set back down. It remains a cup, regardless of what happens to it." The traveler frowns, clearly not seeing the point. "What does this have to do with finding a quiet place to rest?" "Everything," Lingi says. "You seek a quiet place outside of yourself, thinking that peace comes from but peace is not found in the absence of noise, but in the stability of your own mind, even in the presence of noise. Like this cup, your mind can remain stable, unchanged in its essence, regardless of the chaos around it." He picks up the cup, again, holding it out to the traveler. This cup is not disturbed by the ball, by the spilling of tea, by the noise of the market. It is simply a cup, doing what cups do. In the same way, your mind can remain undisturbed by the chaos of life, if you allow it to be. The traveler looks skeptical. "But I'm not a cup. I have feelings, thoughts, reactions. I can't help but be disturbed by noise and chaos." "Ah, but you can choose how you respond to them," Lingi says. "The cup does not resist being filled, or being knocked over, or being emptied. It accepts whatever happens without struggle. This is the secret to finding stability in chaos, not to resist the chaos, but to be like the cup, allowing it to pass through you without disturbing your essence." This teaching lies at the heart of Lingi's approach to Zen, which emphasizes the importance of maintaining a clear, stable mind regardless of external circumstances. Lingi was known for his direct, often shocking methods, which were designed to jolt his students out of their habitual patterns of thinking and help them realize their true nature, what he called the true person without rank, the essential self that is not defined by social status, thoughts, or emotions. The Buddha taught a similar principle in his teaching of the middle way, which avoids the extremes of indulgence and asceticism. Part of this middle way is learning to maintain equanimity, mental calmness and composure in the face of both pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame. In the Salatha Sutta, the Buddha compares the mind to a drum that, when struck, produces a sound that eventually fades away. In the same way, he says, the wise person allows feelings to arise and pass without being carried away by them. From a psychological perspective, the ability to maintain stability in chaos is associated with what is called emotional resilience, the capacity to adapt to stress and adversity. Resilient individuals are not immune to stress. Instead, they have developed ways of responding to stress that allow them to maintain their equilibrium. Research has shown that resilience is not an innate trait, but a skill that can be developed through practices like mindfulness and cognitive reframing. Neuroscientific studies have identified several brain regions involved in resilience, including the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in decision-making and emotional regulation, and the hippocampus, which is involved in memory and stress response. Practices that promote resilience, like mindfulness, meditation, have been shown to increase activity in the prefrontal cortex and reduce activity in the amygdala, helping us to respond to stress with greater calm and clarity. Let's try a brief exercise to cultivate this kind of resilience. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, bring to mind a chaotic or stressful situation in your life, perhaps a busy work environment, a difficult relationship, or a period of uncertainty. Notice how this situation makes you feel physically. Where do you feel tension or discomfort in your body? Now, imagine that your mind is like Linji's teacup. The chaotic situation is like the ball that knocks the cup over. It may cause temporary disruption, but it does not change the essence of the cup. With each breath, imagine yourself returning to this essence, this stable core of awareness that remains unchanged regardless of external circumstances. As you continue to breathe, notice if you can maintain a sense of calm at the center of your being, even as you acknowledge the chaos around you. This is not about ignoring the chaos or pretending it doesn't exist, but about finding a place within yourself that is untouched by it. Let's return to the market square, where the traveler is sitting quietly, watching the activity around him with a new sense of curiosity. So you're saying that peace is not about finding a quiet place, he says, but about being peaceful regardless of where I am. Linji nods, pouring himself another cup of tea. Exactly, he says. The market is noisy and chaotic, but that noise and chaos are not inside you. They are outside, passing through your senses. You can choose to be carried away by them, like a leaf caught in a stream, or you can remain rooted in your own center, like a rock in the middle of a river. He takes a sip of tea, then continues. This does not mean that you must endure suffering in silence. If the chaos is harmful, you should take action to protect yourself. But first, you must find that place of stability within yourself, so that your actions are guided by wisdom, not reactivity. The traveler thinks for a moment, then looks around at the market with fresh eyes. It's still noisy, he says, but somehow it doesn't bother me as much. It's just noise. Linji smiles. You are beginning to understand, he says. The noise is still there, but you have changed your relationship to it. You are no longer identified with the noise, no longer letting it define your state of mind. You are like the cup, which remains a cup, regardless of what is poured into it or what knocks it over. The traveler nods, a sense of calm spreading across his face. Can you teach me how to stay in this place? He asks. Watch the cup, Linji says simply. The traveler looks at the cup, which is now sitting quietly on the table, half full of tea. What am I looking for? He asks. Notice that the cup does not strive to be stable, Linji says. It does not struggle to remain upright. It is simply stable by virtue of its nature. In the same way, your true nature is one of peace and stability. It is only when you forget this, when you become entangled in thoughts and emotions, that you lose your equilibrium. He leans forward, his voice growing more intense. This is the essence of Zen, to realize that you are already stable, already at peace, beneath the layers of thought and emotion. The chaos of life may knock you around, like the ball knocked over the cup, but it cannot change your true nature. You need only to remember this, to return to this essential truth, again and again. This teaching that our true nature is one of peace and stability, and that we need only to remember this to find peace in chaos is central to Linji Zen. It is not about developing new skills or acquiring new knowledge, but about recognizing what is already present within us, a clear, stable mind that is untouched by external circumstances. The Buddha expressed this same idea when he taught that enlightenment is not something to be gained, but something to be realized. In the Udana, he says, There is an unborn, unoriginated, unmade, unfabricated. If there were not that unborn, unoriginated, unmade, unfabricated, there would be no escape discerned from what is born, originated, made, and fabricated. This unborn essence is the same stable core that Lingji points to, the true nature that remains unchanged, regardless of the chaos around it. Let's try another exercise to connect with this essence. Find a comfortable position and take a few deep breaths, allowing your body to relax. Now, imagine that you are sitting in the middle of a storm. Wind is howling, rain is pouring, thunder is crashing, but you are safe, sheltered in a sturdy house with a solid foundation. As you imagine this, notice that while the storm rages outside, inside the house, it is calm and quiet. This house is like your true nature, the stable core that remains undisturbed by the storms of life. With each breath, imagine yourself settling deeper into this house, feeling its solidity, its safety, its peace. Now, imagine stepping outside into the storm, but maintaining the sense of calm and stability you felt inside the house. Notice that the storm is still there, but it no longer has the power to disturb you. You are like Lingji's teacup, allowing the storm to pass through you without changing your essence. Back in the market square, the sun is beginning to set, and the crowd is thinning as merchants pack up their stalls and townspeople head home for the evening. The traveler stands up, bowing to Lingji. "Thank you," he says, his voice calm and steady. "I came looking for a quiet place, but you showed me that the quiet I seek is within myself." Lingji nods, waving a hand dismissively. "Don't thank me," he says. "I didn't give you anything you didn't already have. Now go, your journey continues, but you need not be disturbed by it." The traveler smiles, slinging his pack over his shoulder and heading out of the square. As he walks, he moves with a new sense of ease, his steps light despite the weight of his pack. He is still in the world, still surrounded by noise and chaos, but he has found a place within himself that is untouched by it. Lingji watches him go, then turns back to his tea, sipping slowly as the last of the daylight fades. The market square grows quiet, except for the occasional call of a night bird and the rustle of wind through the empty stalls. Lingji remains, sitting quietly, as stable and unchanging as the earth beneath him. This is the wisdom of the teacup and the storm, that true stability comes not from controlling our external circumstances, but from recognizing the unchanging essence within ourselves. It is a wisdom that can help us to navigate the chaos of modern life with greater calm and resilience, knowing that no matter what storms may come, we carry within us a place of peace that cannot be disturbed. As we conclude this exploration of Lingji's teaching, let's take a moment to connect with this unchanging essence within ourselves. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable, and take a few deep breaths, allowing your body to relax. Imagine that you are like Lingji's teacups, simple, sturdy, unchanging in your essence, regardless of what happens around you. The next time you find yourself in a chaotic or stressful situation, remember the teacup and the storm. Remember that you carry within you a place of peace and stability that is untouched by external circumstances. Return to this place again and again, and you will find that even in the midst of chaos, you can remain calm, centered, and at peace. Take a deep breath in, feeling the air fill your lungs with a sense of stability and strength. Exhale slowly, releasing any tension or reactivity you may be holding. As you breathe, imagine yourself as the teacup, stable and unchanging. allowing whatever comes your way to pass through you without disturbing your essence. Now, as we prepare to move to our next story, carry with you the image of Linji's teacup and the wisdom that true stability comes from within. Remember that no matter how chaotic life may seem, you have the power to remain calm and centered, rooted in the unchanging essence of who you are. Let's journey now to a mountain hermitage, where a Zen master teaches a valuable lesson about the power of patience in the face of frustration. The path from the bustling market town winds upward, leaving behind the sounds of commerce and conversation for the quiet of the mountains. The air grows thinner and cooler as you ascend, carrying the crisp scent of pine and the faint, clean smell of snow that lingers on the highest peaks. The trail is steep in places, requiring careful footing on loose stones and patches of exposed earth. But the effort is rewarded with increasingly spectacular views of the valley below, where the market town now appears as a tiny cluster of buildings, like children's toys scattered across a green carpet after several hours of walking. You round a bend in the trail and catch sight of a small hermitage nestled in a sheltered hollow. It is a simple structure, built from local stone and wood, with a roof of overlapping wooden shingles that have weathered to a soft grey. A small garden surrounds the hermitage, enclosed by a low stone wall, and in the center of the garden, a pond shimmers in the afternoon sun, its surface smooth as glass dot. As you approach, you see a man working in the garden, his back to you. He is bent over, carefully weeding around a bed of young plants. His movements slow and deliberate, as if each action is performed with great care and attention. He is wearing a patched robe of natural linen, and his hair is tied back in a simple knot at the nape of his neck. This is Zufeng Yakun, known as Zufeng, a 9th century Zen master who was renowned for his patience and his ability to teach through simple, everyday actions. You pause at the edge of the garden, not wanting to disturb him, but he looks up as if sensing your presence. He smiles warmly, straightening up and brushing the dirt from his hands onto his robe. "Welcome," he says, his voice gentle but strong, with the faint rasp of someone who has spent many years speaking in the thin mountain air. "Please, come in. Would you like some tea?" You nod, and he gestures for you to follow him into the hermitage. The interior is spare but comfortable, with a low wooden table in the center, surrounded by woven mats. A small wood-burning stove sits in one corner, with a kettle simmering gently on top, and the walls are lined with shelves holding a few simple possessions: a clay teapot, a wooden bowl, several scrolls of calligraphy, and a single book, its pages worn from repeated reading. Zu busies himself making tea, measuring out leaves into the teapot with careful precision, pouring hot water from the kettle, and waiting for exactly the right amount of time before pouring the tea into 2 small cups. He hands one to you, and you take a sip, savoring the rich, earthy flavor. "Thank you for letting me visit," you say. "It is my pleasure," Zufang replies. "The mountain can be a lonely place, and I welcome the company. Tell me, what brings you to these parts?" You explain that you have been traveling, learning from various teachers, and that you have heard of his wisdom, particularly his teachings on patience. "Ah, patience," Zufeng says, nodding thoughtfully. "That is a virtue that is much talked about, but little understood. Many people think of patience as simply waiting, as enduring something unpleasant until it passes. But true patience is something more than that. It is an active state, a way of being in the world with full presence and acceptance." He gestures toward the garden. "Come, let me show you something," he says. You follow him back outside to the pond in the center of the garden. As you approach, you see that the pond is filled with lotus plants, their long stems rising from the murky water, their leaves spread out like green umbrellas. But what catches your eye is a single lotus bud, standing tall above the leaves, its green outer layer tightly closed, showing no sign of opening. "Look at this bud," Zufang says, pointing to it. "I planted these lotus seeds 3 years ago. For 2 years, nothing happened, no sign of growth, no indication that anything was happening beneath the surface. Many people would have given up, would have dug up the seeds, thinking they were dead." He pauses, watching the bud sway gently in the breeze. "But I knew that growth was happening, even if I couldn't see it. The seeds were sending down roots, establishing themselves in the mud, preparing for the day when they would push through the surface of the water. This year, they began to grow. First the leaves, then the stems, and now this bud." He turns to look at you. "But even now, many people would grow impatient. They would want the bud to open immediately, to see the flower in all its beauty. They would prod it or try to force it open, not understanding that this would only harm it." He reaches out, gently touching the bud with the tips of his fingers, as if afraid to disturb it. "The lotus opens in its own time, according to its own nature. No amount of impatience or forcing will make it open faster. In fact, such efforts will only delay or prevent the flower from opening at all. The same is true for many things in life: growth, understanding, enlightenment. They cannot be rushed. They require patience, trust, and the willingness to allow things to unfold in their own time." This teaching captures the essence of Zufang's approach to Zen, which emphasizes the importance of patience and trust in the natural process of growth and transformation. Zufang was known for his long periods of meditation and his willingness to spend years studying with a single teacher, trusting that understanding would come in its own time. The Buddha taught a similar lesson in his story of the mustard seed, in which a woman who has lost her son asks the Buddha to help her find someone who has not experienced loss. The Buddha tells her to bring him a mustard seed from a household that has not known suffering. But she soon realizes that every household has experienced loss. Through this, she comes to understand that suffering is a natural part of life, and that healing comes not through avoiding or rushing through suffering, but through accepting it and allowing it to transform us in its own time. From a psychological perspective, impatience arises from a mismatch between our desires and reality. We want things to happen faster than they do, and when they don't, we experience frustration, anger, and stress. This is related to what psychologists call delay discounting, the tendency to value immediate rewards more highly than delayed rewards, even if the delayed reward is larger. This bias is hardwired into our brains, a product of our evolutionary history, but it can lead to poor decision-making and increased suffering in modern life. Neuroscientific research has identified the ventral striatum and the prefrontal cortex as key brain regions involved in patience and delay discounting. The ventral striatum is involved in processing rewards, while the prefrontal cortex is involved in decision-making and impulse control. When we practice patience, we are essentially strengthening the prefrontal cortex's ability to override the ventral striatum's desire for immediate reward. Let's try a brief exercise to cultivate patience. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, bring to mind a situation in which you are feeling impatient, perhaps waiting for a goal to be achieved, for someone to change, or for a difficult period to pass. Notice how this impatience feels in your body: the tension in your shoulders, the tightness in your chest, the restlessness in your legs. Now, imagine this situation as the lotus bud in Zufang's pond. It is growing, developing, preparing to open, but it is not yet ready. With each breath, imagine yourself softening into this reality, accepting that growth takes time, and trusting that the outcome will be worth the wait. As you continue to breathe, notice if you can release some of the tension and frustration you are feeling, replacing it with a sense of trust and acceptance. This is not about giving up on your goals, but about relating to the process of achieving them with greater ease and peace. Let's return to Zufeng's garden, where he is sitting on a stone bench beside the pond, watching the lotus bud. I used to be very impatient, he says, as if reading your thoughts. When I first began my practice, I wanted enlightenment to come quickly. I would meditate for hours, pushing myself to the point of exhaustion, but the more I pushed, the further away enlightenment seemed. He smiles, remembering those days. Then my teacher said something to me that changed everything. He said, Zufeng, enlightenment is not a mountain to be climbed, but a flower to be grown. You cannot force it. You can only create the conditions for it to grow, and then trust in the process. So I began to focus on creating the right conditions: regular meditation, careful study, simple living, and I stopped worrying about when or if enlightenment would come. And slowly, over time, I began to notice changes in myself, small moments of clarity, greater compassion, a deeper sense of peace. It was not the sudden, dramatic awakening I had imagined, but a gradual unfolding, like the opening of a lotus flower. You look at the lotus bud, wondering when it will open. Will it bloom soon? You ask. Zufeng shrugs. I do not know, he says. It may open tomorrow, or next week, or even next month. But that is not important. What is important is that it is growing, developing, becoming what it is meant to be. The blooming is just one moment in its journey, not the end of it. This is a profound insight, that the process is as important as the outcome, and that growth and development are ongoing, lifelong journeys. Impatience often arises from focusing too much on the outcome and not enough on the present moment, on the small steps that lead to growth. The Buddha expressed this in his teaching of the path, the Noble Eightfold Path, which is both a means to enlightenment and an expression of enlightenment itself. The path is not something to be rushed through to reach a destination, but something to be walked with mindfulness and attention, savoring each step. Let's try another exercise to connect with the present moment in the midst of waiting. Find a comfortable position and take a few deep breaths, allowing your body to relax. Now, bring to mind something you are waiting for, something you are impatient about. Instead of focusing on the outcome, focus on the present moment. Notice the sensations in your body, the feeling of the air on your skin, the sound of your breath, the rhythm of your heartbeat. Notice the world around you, the light filtering through the window, the sounds of birds outside, the smell of coffee or tea. With each breath, imagine yourself fully entering this moment, letting go of your focus on the future and trusting that everything is unfolding as it should. This is the essence of patience, not waiting, but being fully present in the waiting. Back in Zufeng's garden, the sun is beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the pond and the lotus plants. The bud remains closed, but in the soft light, you can see hints of pink beneath the green outer layer, a promise of the beauty to come. Zufeng stands up, stretching his legs after sitting for so long. It is getting late, he says. Would you like to stay here tonight? I have a spare room, simple but comfortable. You accept his offer, grateful for the chance to spend more time in his presence. As you help him gather his gardening tools and prepare for the evening, you feel a sense of peace and calm that you rarely experience in your busy life. You realize that Zufeng's patience is contagious, that being around him helps you to slow down, to appreciate the present moment, and to trust in the natural process of growth. Over dinner, a simple meal of rice, vegetables from his garden, and a small amount of pickled vegetables, Zufeng tells you more about his life, about the years he spent studying with various teachers, about the challenges he faced, and about the moments of insight that sustained him. Through it all, you notice a common theme: his willingness to embrace uncertainty, to trust in the process, and to find meaning in the journey, not just the destination. After dinner, you sit outside for a while, watching the stars come out over the mountains. The air is cold, but the sky is clear, and the stars seem brighter than you have ever seen them. The lotus bud stands silent in the darkness, a reminder of the quiet growth that is happening even when we cannot see it. As you prepare to go to sleep, Zufeng says, "Remember the lotus. It does not worry about when it will bloom or whether it will bloom at all. It simply is, growing and developing in its own time, trusting in the wisdom of nature. Be like the lotus, and you will find patience, peace, and joy in every moment." You think about these words as you drift off to sleep, and you dream of a lotus flower opening slowly, petal by petal, until it is fully open, revealing its beauty to the world. The next morning, you wake early, eager to see if the lotus has bloomed. You go outside to the pond, and there, in the early morning light, you see that the bud has begun to open, its outer petals unfurling to reveal the soft pink inner petals. It is not fully open yet, but it is on its way, unfolding exactly as it should. Zufeng joins you, a smile on his face. "See," he says, "it is opening in its own time, according to its own nature. This is the way of all things, including ourselves." As you pack your things and prepare to leave, you feel a deep sense of gratitude for Zufeng's teachings. You know that impatience will still arise in your life, but you also know that you have a new way of relating to it by remembering the lotus bud, by trusting in the process of growth, and by finding peace in the present moment. Zufeng walks with you to the edge of the garden, where the trail begins its descent back to the valley. He hands you a small package, a gift, he says, a lotus seed to remind you of your time here. Plant it if you like, but remember, growth takes time. Be patient and trust in the process. You thank him, bowing deeply, and begin your journey down the mountain. The lotus seed tucked safely in your pocket, and the image of the unopened bud etched in your mind. This is the wisdom of the unopened lotus, that growth takes time, that patience is not passivity but active trust, and that the most beautiful things in life unfold in their own time, according to their own nature. It is a wisdom that can help us to navigate the challenges of life with greater peace and equanimity, trusting that even when things are not unfolding as we would like, there is a deeper wisdom at work. As we conclude this exploration of Zoon teaching, let's take a moment to connect with this wisdom. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable and take a few deep breaths, allowing your body to relax. Imagine yourself as the lotus bud, growing, developing, preparing to open, but not yet ready. Trust that you are exactly where you need to be, and that growth is happening even when you cannot see it. The next time you feel impatient, remember the unopened lotus. Remember that growth takes time, and that the process is as important as the outcome. Trust in the wisdom of your own nature, and allow yourself to unfold in your own time. Take a deep breath in, feeling the air fill your lungs with a sense of calm and trust. Exhale slowly, releasing any impatience or frustration you may be holding. As you breathe, imagine yourself as the lotus bud, safe in the knowledge that you will bloom when the time is right. Now, as we prepare to move to our next story, carry with you the image of the unopened lotus and the wisdom of patience. Remember that growth takes time, and that every moment of the journey is precious. Let's journey now to a quiet temple, where a Zen master teaches a valuable lesson about self-awareness and the nature of the self. The trail from Zufang's mountain hermitage winds downward, through forests of oak and maple that blaze with color in the early autumn. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from distant villages. As you descend, the sound of a bell echoes through the trees, deep and resonant, calling you toward its source. After an hour's walk, you emerge from the forest into a valley where a temple sits nestled between two hills. Its walls are made of grey stone, weathered by centuries of wind and rain, and its roof is covered with tiles that glint red in the sunlight. This is Huanglong Temple, home to Huanglong Winan, a 11th century Zen master known for his sharp intellect and his ability to cut through his students' illusions with a single question. The temple grounds are quiet, with a sense of order that speaks to the discipline of its inhabitants. Monks in grey robes move silently about their tasks, sweeping the flagstones, tending to the gardens, or carrying bowls of food to the dining hall. At the center of the courtyard stands a large bronze mirror, mounted on a stone pedestal, its surface polished to a high shine. As you approach the mirror, you see a man standing before it, his gaze fixed on his reflection. He is of medium height, with a square jaw and piercing eyes that seem to look not just at his reflection, but through it. His robes are simple but well kept, and his posture is upright, radiating a sense of focused intensity. This is Huanglong Winan, whose 3 barriers, a series of 3 penetrating questions, became famous in Zen circles for their ability to test a student's understanding. A young monk approaches Huanglong, his steps hesitant. He bows deeply, then stands with his hands clasped in front of him, his eyes cast downward. "Master," he says, his voice trembling slightly, "I am lost. I have been practicing for years, but I feel as if I am no closer to enlightenment than when I first began. I read the sutras, I meditate, I perform my duties, but I still feel a deep sense of confusion. Who am I, really? What is the point of all this?" Huanglong does not take his eyes off the mirror. "What do you see?" he asks, his voice calm but probing. The young monk looks up, confused. "I see you, Master," standing before the mirror. Huanglong shakes his head. "No, what do you see when you look in the mirror?" The monk hesitates, then steps forward and looks into the mirror. He sees his own reflection, his young face, his shaven head, his robes. "I see myself, Master," he says. "Do you?" Huanglong asks. "Or do you see the story you tell yourself about who you are? The ideas, the beliefs, the labels that you have accumulated over the years?" The monk frowns, clearly struggling to understand. "What's the difference, Master? It is still me." Huanglong finally turns away from the mirror, fixing the monk with his gaze. "The difference is everything," he says. "What you see in the mirror is not your true self. It is a collection of thoughts, feelings, and experiences that you have identified with. Your true self is the one who is looking at the reflection, not the reflection itself." This is the heart of Huanglong's teaching, that our sense of self is often based on a false identification with our thoughts, emotions, and physical form, rather than with the pure awareness that observes these things. This false identification is the root of much of our suffering, including the confusion and mimam, uncertainty or bewilderment, that the young monk is experiencing. The Buddha taught this same truth in his doctrine of anatta, or no self, which we explored earlier. He argued that there is no fixed, permanent self, but rather a constantly changing flow of phenomena. Our sense of self is a mental construct, a story that we tell ourselves, but it is not the ultimate reality. From a psychological perspective, this false sense of self is related to what is called the ego, the part of the mind that creates a sense of separate identity. The ego is not inherently bad. It serves an important function in helping us navigate the world and maintain a sense of continuity. However, when we become overly identified with the ego, we lose touch with our deeper, more authentic self, leading to confusion, anxiety, and suffering. Neuroscientific research has shown that the sense of self is associated with a network of brain regions, including the prefrontal cortex, the insula, and the posterior cingulate cortex. These regions are involved in processing thinking about ourselves and in integrating information about our bodies, thoughts, and emotions. When we practice self-awareness, we activate these regions in a more balanced way, reducing our identification with the ego and increasing our connection to a larger sense of self. Let's try a brief exercise to explore this. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, close your eyes and bring your attention to your sense of self. Notice the thoughts you have about who you are, your name, your roles, your likes and dislikes, your strengths and weaknesses. These are all part of the story of you. Now, imagine stepping back from this story, as if you are watching it from a distance. Notice that there is a part of you that is aware of this story, a part that is not caught up in it. This is your true self-awareness that observes your thoughts and feelings without being defined by them. As you continue to breathe, rest in this awareness, feeling the freedom that comes from not being limited by the story of who you think you are. This is the self that Huanglong is pointing to, the self that is beyond ideas and concepts, the self that is pure awareness. Let's return to the temple courtyard, where the young monk is looking into the mirror again, his expression thoughtful. So what I see in the mirror is not my true self, he says, but just a reflection, a story. Once Long nods. Exactly, he says. And when you realize that, you are no longer trapped by the story. You can see it for what it is, a collection of thoughts and experiences that have shaped you, but that do not define you. But then who am I? The monk asks, his voice filled with genuine confusion. Huanglong points to the mirror. Who is it that is asking the question? He replies, who is the one who is aware of the confusion? That is your true self, the one who is beyond questions and answers, beyond confusion and clarity. This question, who is the one who is aware, is a powerful cone that can help to cut through the illusion of the ego. It points to the fact that the true self is not an object that can be known or understood, but the subject that knows and understands. It is the awareness that is present in every moment, the ground of all experience. The Buddha expressed this in his teaching of the pure awareness that is the essence of enlightenment. In the Diamond Sutra, he says, those who see me as form or hear me as sound are following an incorrect path and cannot perceive the Tathagata. The Tathagata, or thus gone one, is another name for the Buddha, and here he is pointing out that his true nature is not his physical form or his teachings, but the pure awareness that underlies them. Let's try another exercise to connect with this pure awareness. Find a comfortable position and take a few deep breaths. allowing your body to relax. Now, instead of focusing on your thoughts or feelings, focus on the act of seeing, hearing, or feeling itself. Notice the raw experience of sensation without labeling or interpreting it. For example, if you hear a sound, don't think about what it is or where it's coming from, just experience the sound as pure vibration. If you feel a sensation in your body, don't identify it as tension or relaxation. Just feel the sensation as energy. As you do this, you may notice that there is a sense of spaciousness, a quality of pure awareness that is not limited by the content of your experience. This is your true self, the awareness that is always present, even when you are not aware of it. Back in the temple courtyard, the sun has moved higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the flagstones. The young monk is sitting cross-legged on the ground, his eyes closed, his expression peaceful. When he opens his eyes, there is a new clarity in his gaze. "I think I understand," he says. "My confusion arises because I am looking for my true self in the wrong place, in my thoughts, my experiences, my reflection in the mirror. But my true self is the one who is doing the looking." Huanglong smiles. "You are getting closer," he says. "But remember, even this understanding is just another thought, another reflection in the mirror. Your true self is beyond understanding, beyond words, beyond even the sense of being a self at all." The monk nods, his face lighting up with a smile. "It's like trying to catch your own shadow," he says. "The more you reach for it, the further it moves away. But when you stop reaching, you realize that it has been with you all along." Huanglong laughs, a deep, rich sound that echoes through the courtyard. "Exactly," he says. "Your true self is not something you can find or achieve, because it is what you already are. It is like the sun, which is always shining, even when it is hidden by clouds. Your practice is not to create the sun, but to clear away the clouds of your thoughts and beliefs so that its light can shine through." Over the course of the day, the young monk practices this kind of self-awareness, moving through his tasks with a new sense of presence. He sweeps the courtyard, not just to clean, but to notice the sensation of the broom in his hands, the sound of the straw brushing against the stones, the movement of his body. He eats his meals, savoring each bite, noticing the flavors and textures, without rushing or distraction. He meditates, not trying to empty his mind, but simply watching his thoughts come and go. Like clouds passing through the sky. By evening, he feels a sense of peace that he has never experienced before. The confusion is still there, but it no longer has the power to disturb him. He sees it as just another thought, another cloud in the sky of his awareness as the sun sets, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple. The young monk approaches Huanglong, who is once again standing before the mirror. "Thank you, Master," he says. "You have shown me that the confusion I felt was just a story, a reflection in the mirror. My true self is the one who is aware of the story, and that self is always clear, always peaceful." Huanglong nods. "Remember this," he says, "when the clouds of confusion return, and they will, remember that they are just clouds, and that the sun of your true nature is always shining behind them. You do not need to fight the clouds or try to make them go away. You only need to remember the sun." The monk bows deeply, then turns to leave, his steps light and purposeful. As he walks through the temple gates, he feels a new sense of clarity and purpose, knowing that his practice is not about becoming someone else, but about remembering who he already is. Huanglong watches him go, then turns back to the mirror, his gaze softening as he looks at his reflection. In that moment, he sees not just an old monk with a weathered face, but the same pure awareness that shines in all beings. The same awareness that is the true nature of everything. This is the wisdom of the mirror-gazing practitioner, that our true self is not found in our thoughts, emotions, or physical form, but in the pure awareness that observes these things. It is a wisdom that can help us to overcome confusion and mimon. By remembering that we are not limited by our stories or our circumstances, but are ultimately free, vast, and unchanging. As we conclude this exploration of Huanglong's teaching, let's take a moment to connect with this pure awareness. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable, and take a few deep breaths, allowing your body to relax. Imagine that you are standing before a mirror, but instead of seeing your reflection, you see only pure light, the light of your true nature. The next time you feel confused or lost, remember the mirror. Remember that your true self is not the confusion, but the awareness that is aware of it. Rest in this awareness, and you will find that even in the midst of confusion, there is a deep sense of peace and clarity. Take a deep breath in, feeling the light of awareness fill your being. Exhale slowly, releasing any identification with your thoughts or feelings. As you breathe, imagine yourself as this pure awareness, vast and unchanging, beyond all confusion and doubt. Now, as we prepare to move to our next story, carry with you the image of the mirror and the wisdom of self-awareness. Remember that your true self is not what you see in the mirror, but the one who is looking. Let's journey now to a quiet library, where a Zen master teaches a valuable lesson about the nature of knowledge and understanding. The path from Huanglong Temple leads through a narrow valley where a river flows gently, its waters clear enough to see the smooth stones on the bottom. Willows grow along the banks, their branches dipping into the water, and dragonflies dart back and forth, their iridescent wings catching the sunlight. After walking for an hour, you come to a stone bridge that crosses the river, and on the other side, a small library nestled against the base of a hill. The library is a two-story building, made of wood, with a steeply sloped roof and windows that look out over the river. The door is carved with images of scholars and sages, their faces serene as they study scrolls and books. As you push open the door, you are greeted by the smell of old paper and ink, a scent that speaks of centuries of knowledge and wisdom. Inside, the library is dimly lit by shafts of sunlight that filter through the windows, illuminating dust motes that dance in the air. The walls are lined with shelves that reach from floor to ceiling, filled with scrolls, books, and manuscripts. Some are bound in leather, their spines embossed with gold lettering, while others are simple paper scrolls, tied with string. In the center of the room, sitting at a large wooden table, is a man with a long beard and gentle eyes. He is wearing a robe of dark blue, and his hair is tied back in a top knot. In front of him, spread out on the table, are several scrolls, and he is tracing the characters with his finger, muttering to himself, as if engaged in a conversation with the text. This is Kekin Yuanwu, known as Yuanwu, a 12th century Zen master who is best known for his commentary on the Blue Cliff Record, one of the most important collections of Zen koans. A young scholar approaches Yuanwu, carrying a stack of books in his arms. He sets them down on the table with a thud, causing Yuanwu to look up from his scrolls. Master Yuanwu, the scholar says, bowing respectfully, I have been studying these texts for months, but I feel as if I am no closer to understanding Zen. The more I read, the more confused I become. There are so many different teachings, so many interpretations. How am I to know which one is correct? Yuanwu smiles, gesturing for the scholar to sit down. You are like a man who is thirsty, he says, and instead of drinking water, he reads books about water. He memorizes descriptions of water, studies its chemical composition, learns about its properties, but he remains thirsty because he has never actually drunk it. The scholar frowns, not sure he understands. But master, these books contain the wisdom of the great masters. How can I understand Zen without studying them? Yuanwu picks up one of the scrolls from the table and holds it up. This scroll contains the words of the Buddha, he says. But is this scroll the Buddha's teaching? The scholar nods. Of course it is. It is a record of his words. Is it? Yuanwu asks. Or is it a finger pointing to the moon? The finger is useful for showing us where the moon is. But if we mistake the finger for the moon, we will never see the moon itself. He sets the scroll down gently on the table. The teachings in these books are like fingers pointing to the moon of enlightenment. They can guide us, show us the way, but they are not the enlightenment itself. To confuse the teachings with enlightenment is to mistake the finger for the moon. This analogy, the finger pointing to the moon, is one of the most famous in Zen Buddhism. It comes from the Lankavatara Sutra, where the Buddha says, just as a finger pointing at the moon is not the moon itself, so too are words not the reality they describe. The point is that language and concepts are tools for pointing to reality, but they are not reality itself. To truly understand, we must go beyond the words to the experience they point to. The scholar looks thoughtful. So you are saying that reading books is useless? He asks. Yuanwu shakes his head. Not useless, he says. A finger can be very useful for pointing to the moon if we know that it is a finger, not the moon. The teachings can help to guide us, to correct our misunderstandings, to inspire us, but they cannot replace the direct experience of enlightenment. That is something you must taste for yourself. He reaches for a teapot that sits on a small stove in the corner of the room, pouring hot water into 2 cups and adding a pinch of tea leaves. He hands 1 cup to the scholar. Drink this tea, he says. No amount of reading about tea's flavor, its aroma, its effects can replace the experience of drinking it. In the same way, no amount of reading about enlightenment can replace the experience of it. The scholar takes a sip of tea, savoring the rich, earthy flavor. I see what you mean, he says, but how do I move from studying the teachings to experiencing enlightenment? Yuanwu takes a sip of his own tea, then sets the cup down. You must learn to use the teachings as a raft, he says. A raft is useful for crossing a river, but once you reach the other side, you do not carry the raft with you. In the same way, the teachings are useful for crossing the river of ignorance, but once you have crossed, you do not cling to them. This analogy of the raft comes from the Buddha himself, who told a parable about a man who builds a raft to cross a dangerous river. After reaching the other side, the man does not carry the raft with him, but leaves it behind, knowing that it has served its purpose. The Buddha used this parable to teach that his teachings are a means to an end, not an end in themselves. From a psychological perspective, this is related to what is called cognitive flexibility, the ability to adapt our thinking to different situations, to use concepts and ideas without becoming rigidly attached to them. When we become too attached to our beliefs or ideas, we lose this flexibility. Seeing the world through a fixed lens that limits our understanding. Neuroscientific research has shown that cognitive flexibility is associated with activity in the prefrontal cortex, particularly the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is involved in executive functions like decision-making, problem-solving, and cognitive control. Practices that encourage us to question our assumptions and let go of rigid thinking, like working with CONSCAN, help to strengthen this region of the brain, increasing our cognitive flexibility. Let's try a brief exercise to cultivate this kind of flexibility. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, bring to mind a belief or idea that you hold dear, something you are quite sure is true. It might be a political belief, a religious conviction, or even a simple assumption about how the world works. Now, imagine for a moment that this belief is not absolutely true, but simply a useful tool, a finger pointing to the moon. Notice how this feels. Does it create a sense of anxiety or discomfort? Or does it create a sense of freedom, opening up new possibilities? As you continue to breathe, practice holding the belief lightly, recognizing that it is a useful map, but not the territory itself. This is not about abandoning the belief, but about relating to it with greater flexibility, allowing yourself to see other perspectives and possibilities. Let's return to the library, where the scholar is looking at the stack of books he brought with him, his expression thoughtful. So the key is to use the teachings without being used by them, he says. Yuanwu nods. Exactly, he says. A skilled carpenter uses tools to build a house, but he does not become attached to the tools. He chooses the right tool for the job, and when the job is done, he puts the tools away. In the same way, a skilled practitioner uses the teachings to awaken, but does not become attached to them. He reaches for one of the scrolls on the table, unrolling it to reveal a passage from the Diamond Sutra. Listen to this, he says, reading aloud. When I say all phenomena are like dreams and illusions, do you think this means that phenomena do not exist? No, it means that they exist, but not in the way we think they do. They are like reflections in a mirror, real in their appearance, but not fixed or substantial. He rolls up the scroll again. These words point to the truth, but they are not the truth. To understand the truth, you must look beyond the words, to the experience they describe. The scholar thinks for a moment, then asks, but how do I know when I have seen the truth? How do I know when I have reached the moon and am no longer looking at the finger? Yuanwu smiles. That is the beauty of it, he says. The moon recognizes itself. When you see it, you will know. It is not something that can be described in words, but something that is felt directly and immediately. He stands up, walking to a window that looks out over the river. Look at the river, he says. You can read books about the river, its current, its depth, its course, but until you step into it, you will never truly know it. The same is true for enlightenment. You can read about it, talk about it, think about it, but until you experience it, you will never truly understand it. The scholar stands up and joins Yuanwu at the window, looking out at the river as it flows gently toward the horizon. I have spent so much time studying the maps, he says, that I have forgotten to look at the territory. Yuanwu nods. It is easy to do, he says. The maps are comforting. They give us a sense of control, of understanding. But the territory is always more complex, more beautiful, more alive than any map can ever be. Over the course of the afternoon, Yuanwu and the scholar discuss various teachings. But instead of focusing on the words themselves, they explore the experiences that the words point to. Yuanwu encourages the scholar to question everything, to test the teachings against his own experience, to not accept anything simply because it is written in a book. As the sun begins to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the scholar packs up his books, but he carries them differently now, not as sacred texts that contain all the answers, but as guides that can help him on his journey. "Thank you, Master Yuanwu," he says. "You have helped me to see that my studying has become a kind of obstacle, preventing me from seeing the truth directly. I will still read these books, but I will also spend more time in meditation, in silence, in simply being." Yuanwu nods. "Remember the moon," he says. "When you look at the finger, let it remind you to look up, to see the moon itself. And when you see the moon, remember the finger that pointed the way." The scholar bows deeply, then turns to leave, walking slowly down the path that leads back to the river. As he goes, he pauses for a moment, looking up at the sky where the first stars are beginning to appear. He thinks about Yuanyu's words, about the finger and the moon, and he feels a sense of excitement and possibility, as if a door has opened that he did not know was there. Yuanwu watches him go, then returns to his scrolls, but he does not read them with the same intensity as before. Instead, he lets his eyes rest on the characters, allowing them to point beyond themselves to the truth they describe. He thinks about the many students he has taught over the years, each one struggling to find their way, each one at first mistaking the finger for the moon. He knows that the scholar's journey has only just begun, that there will be times when he forgets, when he becomes lost in the words again. But he also knows that once you have caught a glimpse of the moon, even through the clouds, you can never be satisfied with just looking at the finger. This is the wisdom of books and pointing to the moon, that knowledge is a tool, not an end in itself, that words can guide us, but they cannot replace direct experience, that the truth we seek is not in the pages of a book, but in the living, breathing world around us and within us. As we conclude this exploration of Yuanyu's teaching, let's take a moment to reflect on our own relationship with knowledge and understanding. What fingers have we been mistaking for the moon? What books, ideas, or beliefs have we become too attached to, forgetting that they are simply guides? The next time you find yourself lost in study or caught up in intellectual debate, remember the finger and the moon. Let the words remind you to look beyond them, to seek the direct experience that they point to. And when you find that experience, let it deepen your appreciation for the words that helped to guide you there. Take a deep breath in, feeling the life and energy of direct experience flowing through you. Exhale slowly, releasing any attachment to ideas or concepts that may be limiting your understanding. As you breathe, imagine yourself looking up at the moon, its light shining bright and clear, illuminating the world around you. Now, as we prepare to move to our final story, carry with you the image of the finger pointing to the moon, and the wisdom that knowledge is a guide, not a destination. Remember that the truth you seek is not in books or ideas, but in the direct experience of life itself. Let's journey now to a quiet garden at dawn, where a Zen master shares a final teaching about the nature of life and death, and the peace that comes from embracing both. The path from Yuanyu's library follows the river downstream, winding through a valley where the trees grow taller and the air grows cooler. As night falls, you find shelter in a small inn, and when you wake before dawn, you set out again, eager to reach your final destination. The sky is still dark, but the first hints of light are beginning to paint the eastern horizon in soft shades of pink and blue. After walking for an hour, you come to a walled garden, its gates open as if inviting you in. You step through, and the world seems to slow down. The garden is quiet, with a stillness that feels almost sacred. Stone paths wind through beds of flowers, their petals closed for the night, and a small pond sits in the center, its surface smooth as glass, As the first rays of sunlight over the garden walls, they catch on thousands of tiny dewdrops that cling to the grass, the leaves, and the petals of the flowers. Each dewdrop glows like a diamond, refracting the light into a spectrum of colors. And for a moment, the garden is transformed into a place of magical beauty. Standing at the edge of the pond is an elderly monk, his posture straight despite his years, his face lined with the wisdom of a long life. He is wearing a simple grey robe, and his hair is white, tied back in a small knot. He is watching the dewdrops catch the light, his expression a mixture of reverence and peace. This is Zoon, known as the Empty Cloud, a 20th century Zen master who lived to be over 110 years old, and whose life was a testament to the power of resilience and spiritual practice. A young woman approaches Zoon, her footsteps soft on the dew-covered grass. She is carrying a small bouquet of flowers, and her eyes are red from crying. She stops a few feet away, bowing deeply before speaking. "Master Zoon," she says, her voice trembling, "my mother died last night. I loved her so much, and I can't bear the thought of never seeing her again. The pain is so great, it feels like my heart is breaking. How can I ever find peace again?" Zoon turns to her, his eyes filled with compassion. He does not speak immediately, but gestures for her to sit beside him on a stone bench. She sits, clutching the bouquet of flowers to her chest, and he waits until she is ready to look at him. "Look at the dewdrops," he says finally, his voice soft but strong, like the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze. The woman follows his gaze, seeing the thousands of tiny droplets glowing in the sunlight. "They're beautiful," she says, her voice still thick with grief. Zoon nods. "They are," he says, "but in a few hours they will be gone. As the sun rises higher and the air warms, they will evaporate, disappearing into the sky. Do you think this is a tragedy?" The woman frowns. "No, I suppose not. It's just the way things are." "Exactly," Zoon says. "The dewdrops are born in the night, when the air cools and moisture condenses. They exist for a few brief hours, catching the morning light, and then they return to the sky, to fall again as rain or dew when the conditions are right. This is their nature, their cycle." He reaches out, gently touching a dewdrop on a nearby leaf. It trembles, then slips from the leaf, falling to the ground and disappearing into the soil. "Does this dewdrop cease to exist when it falls?" he asks. "Or does it become part of the earth, part of the plant, part of the next rain that will water the garden?" The form changes, but the essence remains. The woman looks thoughtful, but her eyes are still filled with pain. "But my mother is not a dewdrop," she says. "She was a person with thoughts and feelings, with a life that was uniquely hers. How can her life just end?" Zoon smiles gently. "Who says it ends?" he asks. "The body returns to the earth, like the dewdrop returns to the soil, but the energy that animated her, the love, the kindness, the wisdom she shared, does not disappear. It lives on in the people she touched, in the memories they carry, in the way she changed the world for the better, even in small ways." He pauses, looking out over the garden as the sun rises higher, casting longer shadows across the grass. "Life is like the dew," he says. "It is brief, fragile, and beautiful. It appears, shines brightly for a time, and then returns to the source from which it came. This is not an ending, but a transformation, a return to the vastness from which all things arise." This teaching reflects the Buddhist understanding of the cycle of life and death, known as samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death and rebirth that is driven by ignorance and craving. But Zoon is pointing beyond samsara to the underlying reality that transcends this cycle, the pure awareness that is the essence of all beings, which is not born and does not die. The Buddha taught this in his final moments when he told his disciples, "All compounded things are subject to decay. Strive with diligence." He was pointing out that all things that arise from causes and conditions, including our bodies and our minds, are impermanent. But the awareness that observes this impermanence is itself beyond birth and death. From a psychological perspective, the pain of grief arises in part from our resistance to the natural cycle of life and death. We cling to the people we love, to the lives we know, and when they change or end, we experience suffering. This is related to what psychologists call loss aversion, the tendency to feel the pain of loss more strongly than the pleasure of gain. This bias is hardwired into our brains, but it can lead us to suffer unnecessarily when we resist the inevitable changes of life. Research has shown that accepting the reality of loss and impermanence can help to ease the pain of grief. This does not mean that we do not feel sadness or miss those we have lost, but that we allow ourselves to experience these feelings without resistance, trusting that they will soften over time and that we can find meaning and joy in life again. Let's try a brief exercise to cultivate this kind of acceptance. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, bring to mind someone you have lost or a part of your life that has ended. Notice the feelings that arise: sadness, anger, longing, regret. Allow yourself to feel these emotions fully, without judgment or resistance. Now, imagine that this loss is like the dewdrop falling from the leaf. It is a natural part of the cycle, a transformation rather than an ending. The person or the life you knew may be gone, but the love, the memories, the lessons, these remain, part of who you are and how you move through the world. As you continue to breathe, imagine yourself releasing any resistance to this loss, allowing yourself to trust in the natural cycle of life and death, of beginnings and endings. This is not about forgetting, but about carrying what is precious forward with you, while making space for new life and new experiences. Let's return to the garden, where the sun has risen higher, and some of the dewdrops have already begun to evaporate, leaving the grass and leaves glistening. The woman is still sitting beside Zoon, but her posture has relaxed, and the tears have stopped flowing. "I used to think that death was an ending," she says, "but now I see that it's just a change. My mother's body is gone, but she's still with me in the way I laugh, in the stories I tell, in the love I have for others." Zoon nods. "She is like the dewdrop," he says, "which becomes part of the sky, then part of the rain, then part of the garden again. Her essence continues, in you and in all those whose lives she touched." He points to the bouquet of flowers in her hands. "These flowers will wilt and die, but if you plant their seeds, new flowers will grow. In this way, life continues, in new forms, but connected to what came before." The woman looks down at the flowers, then up at Zoon, a small smile playing on her lips. "I think I understand," she says. "Grief is like the pain of watching the dew evaporate. It's natural to feel sad, but we can also feel gratitude for having seen their beauty, even if it was brief." Zoon smiles. "Exactly," he says. "The Buddha taught that life is like a candle flame. When one candle lights another, the first flame does not cease to exist. It continues in the second flame. In the same way, the love and wisdom of those who have died continue in us, if we let them. This analogy of the candle flame captures the essence of the Buddhist understanding of rebirth, not as the reincarnation of a fixed self, but as the continuation of energy and influence. Like a flame passing from one candle to another, our actions, our thoughts, our love, these are the seeds we plant, which continue to grow long after we are gone. As the morning sun climbs higher in the sky, the garden comes alive. A bee buzzes past, heading for the first flower to open its petals, and a bird begins to sing, its melody clear and sweet. The woman stands up, placing the bouquet of flowers on a small stone altar near the pond. "Thank you, Master Zuan," she says, bowing deeply. "You have helped me to see that my mother is not truly gone, and that my love for her can continue to grow, even in her absence." Zuin stands up as well, his movements slow but steady. "Remember the dewdrops," he says. "They teach us that even the briefest moments of beauty are precious, and that all things are connected in the great cycle of life. When you feel grief arising, let it remind you of the love that caused it, and let that love guide you in all that you do." The woman nods, then turns to leave, walking slowly through the garden gates with a new sense of peace in her step. As she goes, she pauses to touch a leaf, its dewdrops now beginning to fade, and smiles, knowing that beauty and loss are two sides of the same coin, both part of the precious tapestry of life. Zuin watches her go, then turns back to the garden, which is now bathed in sunlight. The dewdrops are mostly gone, evaporated into the sky, but the garden is still beautiful in some ways, more so. As the flowers begin to open their petals to the sun, he thinks about his long life, about the many people he has known, the many lives that have touched his own. He has seen war and peace, joy and suffering, life and death. Through it all, he has learned that the only constant is change, and that peace comes not from resisting this change, but from embracing it, from seeing the beauty in the dewdrop, even as it evaporates, and trusting in the cycle that will bring new life. This is the wisdom of the morning dew and eternity, that life is brief and precious, that death is not an ending but a transformation, and that all things are connected in the vast web of existence. It is a wisdom that can help us to face loss with courage and grace, to cherish the moments we have with those we love, and to find peace in the knowledge that we are part of something greater than ourselves, something eternal. Even as our individual lives are fleeting, as we conclude this final exploration, let's take a moment to reflect on the lessons we have learned from the flower in the mirror, the silent answer, the falling leaves, the teacup and the storm, the unopened lotus, the mirror-gazing practitioner, the finger pointing to the moon, and now the morning dew and eternity. These stories all point to the same fundamental truths, that reality is not as it appears, that our suffering arises from our attachment to fixed ideas and desires, and that peace comes from seeing things as they are, immanent, interconnected, and ultimately beyond words and concepts. The next time you face anger, confusion, fear, impatience, or grief, remember these stories. Let them guide you back to the present moment, to the direct experience of life as it is, without the filter of your thoughts and beliefs. And remember that you are part of the great cycle of life, like the dewdrop, like the falling leaf, like the flower that opens and closes with the sun. Take a deep breath in, feeling your connection to all life, to the earth, to the sky, to the countless beings who have lived before you and who will come after. Exhale slowly, releasing any fear or resistance, and rest in the peace of knowing that you are part of something vast and beautiful, something eternal. As you step back into your life, Carry with you the wisdom of these Zen masters and let it guide you with compassion, with clarity, and with an open heart. The journey ends here, but the path continues in each moment, in each breath, in each act of awareness and love. As we cross the streams of these 10 stories, the mind is as clear as if washed by spring water. Those chaotic thoughts, like fallen leaves, have drifted away with the current dot. May these truths be like stars in the night sky, guiding you when needed. May peace be as natural as breathing, accompanying you every night. Thank you for sharing this journey from Zen Mind Temple. Good night. May you sleep in awareness